Hey listeners, tonight we're setting sail for the most awkward, tense, and politically flammable period history has to offer. The 20 years that separated the biggest war from the next, even bigger war. This isn't the fun jazz age we see in the movies. This is the global fever dream where everyone knew the party was over, but kept dancing anyway. Right up until the point when a bunch of sharply dressed dictators pulled the plug. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, dim those lights. Switch on a fan for that soft white noise. Get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in so the imaginary financial rats can't nibble your toes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to survive a global war, only to realize you had purchased a first-class ticket for the sequel? Could you have lived on a salary that required a wheelbarrow to carry your cash, but still couldn't buy a cabbage? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1919, breathing the toxic fumes of exhausted victory and simmering resentment. Sleep tight. Chapter 1. The Peace Treaty that Declared War. You finally survived the Great War, but now you're stuck sitting at the Paris Peace Conference, watching diplomats argue about the furniture arrangements while simultaneously creating a financial and emotional bill that would bankrupt an entire continent. This isn't peace. It's a receipt for revenge, signed in a moment of extreme short-sighted spite. You find yourself drifting into the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, a setting so opulent it feels insulting given the mud and death you just experienced. This room, built for royal glory and mirrored reflection, is now hosting a gathering of global exhaustion and calculated fury, where you observe men in expensive suits who are tired, yes, but mostly just furious. And the air is thick with cigar smoke, old-world politics, and the faint, unsettling scent of historical hubris. You are watching the so-called Big Four, the men who truly believe they hold the world's fate in their hands. There is Georges Clemenceau, the French Prime Minister known as the Tiger, radiating pure, unadulterated vengeance, treating every German diplomat like an unpaid parking ticket, for whom the treaty is not peace, but a security deposit, demanding Germany pay with everything short of their national recipe for strudel, because you can almost hear him growling that France has bled the most, and therefore France must gain the most, confirming that his goal is not stability, but a guarantee that Germany can never, ever do this again. Then there is British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, the slippery Welsh wizard, trying to balance revenge with reality, who wants enough punishment to satisfy the angry British public, who chanted, "Hang the Kaiser," during the recent elections, but not so much that Germany collapses entirely and becomes a breeding ground for communism, or, God forbid, fails to pay Britain back its war debts, leaving him walking a political tightrope, juggling public fury and global economics. Alongside them, you watch President Woodrow Wilson trying to inject a dose of gentle academic idealism into the room with his famous 14 points, wanting everyone to be friends, share their toys, and join his new international club, the League of Nations. sounding like a high school principal lecturing a room full of tired, knife-fighting students, genuinely believing that the power of goodwill and democracy can fix the deep, bloody trenches of European history, while the European powers nod politely, but quietly sharpen their pencils, waiting for him to finish so they can get back to dividing up the spoils and assigning blame, treating his moralizing like background noise, necessary but ultimately irrelevant to the business of raw power. And finally, there is Vittorio Orlando of Italy, mostly there for vibes and to loudly complain about not receiving enough Adriatic coastline, the fourth wheel, whom everyone is slightly annoyed by, constantly, reminding everyone of Italy's sacrifices while primarily securing minor colonial gains. You are observing a scene of profound cognitive dissonance, where these men discuss abstract concepts like self-determination, the right of nations to govern themselves, while simultaneously drawing borders on maps with colored pencils, creating brand new countries like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia out of the wreckage of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. And you realize that while this is fantastic in theory, in practice, they are creating a whole new generation of ethnic tensions and border disputes for you to worry about later. The bullseye on the board, the central target, is Germany, and you see the exhausted German delegation, who weren't even allowed to negotiate but only to receive the final terms, stare blankly as the Treaty of Versailles, a document designed to inflict maximum emotional and financial pain, is read. You absorb the details that will define your life for the next 2 decades, starting with the War Guilt Clause, Article 231, the ultimate slap in the face, where Germany must accept sole responsibility for starting the entire war, despite the historical truth of complex origins. A contract of shaming, designed to provide a legal basis for the payments to follow. And the resentment this single clause sparks is instantly toxic, sinking deep into the German national psyche. Then come the reparations, the fun part, where Germany is handed an enormous, unspecified bill for the war damages suffered by the Allied nations, a sum eventually calculated at a staggering 33 billion gold marks, which is not meant to be paid off, but meant to be a permanent fiscal leash, like being trapped in a lifetime subscription for a product you never wanted, knowing you have no way to cancel it or even afford the monthly fee. You watch the territorial losses, where large chunks of German territory are handed over like slices of cake, giving Alsace-Lorraine back to France, and creating the infamous Polish corridor in the east, which separates East Prussia from the rest of Germany, and instantly becomes a national obsession for German nationalists, while all the colonies are stripped away. You note the military disarmament, where Germany's army is capped at a tiny 100,000 men, with no air force, no submarines, and strict limits on tanks and heavy artillery, leaving the Rhineland permanently demilitarized, a state where you realize Germany is left feeling exposed, humiliated, and utterly incapable of defending its own borders. It is astonishing. You just survived a war that was supposed to end all wars, but now you're watching the victors ensure the defeated feel absolutely no hope for the future. a terrible historical trade-off, where peace in our time actually means a few years' delay before the bombs start falling again. And you are witnessing the precise moment when the peace designed to last forever guarantees the next global war. The pen, in this specific instance, is not mightier than the sword. It's just writing a much larger, more terrible check, like cleaning up a catastrophic natural disaster by planting the seeds for another one exactly 20 years later, leaving the air in the room thick with diplomatic resentment and the absolute guarantee of a sequel. You realize that the war may have ended the monarchy and the empires, but it didn't end the human thirst for revenge, or the political arrogance of believing a piece of paper can stifle a national identity. And as the German delegation is forced to sign the document under protest, you know this is not a closure, but a cold, angry, formal declaration of a long, miserable intermission. And this atmosphere of resentment, financial impossibility, and national shame is where your story truly begins, as you have just inherited the most unstable, explosive political landscape in modern history. Chapter 2. The Treaty of Versailles, a paperweight with attitude. Hey guys, welcome to your Pillow Time history cruise where we'll doze off, dreaming about agreements thicker than a lasagna that was left to simmer a few hours too long. Tonight, we're diving into the post-World War I chaos, arguably less coherent than a toddler trying to explain how they lost their favorite toy to the dog. Yes, it's the treaty that could only be described as the world's most overpriced sorry note, the Treaty of Versailles, also known as the world's most spectacular paperwork blunder. Before we start, if you enjoy this auditory journey through mildly interesting but mainly absurd history, feel free to give that like button a nudge, subscribe, and leave a comment. But only if you actually enjoy it. We wouldn't want to influence your ambivalence about ancient treaties like a financial advisor who thinks investing means buying lottery tickets. So, dim those lights. Switch on a soothing fan, because who doesn't enjoy wind chill while trying to sleep? And get cozy. Have you ever wondered what the paper-shuffling world got up to right after the end of a world war? Or if the negotiators used more rubber bands than reason? Did they argue over who got the last donut during lunch at the peace talks? How many cat videos do you think they watched to relieve their stress from the negotiations? And importantly, what was the smell of the room filled with passionate arguments and questionable colognes? Congratulations. You've just awakened in 1919, a year where peace is hand-delivered with a side of hefty reparations and the occasional meltdown. Here in the hallowed halls of Versailles, the air is thick with the smell of old leather, burnt coffee, and regret, much like your college dorm after finals week. You're surrounded by men in stiff collars and longer faces than a country road, all juggling maps of Europe as if they were three-dimensional puzzles made for toddler geniuses. Spoiler alert, they weren't. Let's talk about this document, shall we? The Treaty of Versailles. It's more than just a faded piece of paper. It's a veritable death sentence for German economy. Imagine a bill so massive it could crush a small car and then, for good measure, sit atop it like an overstuffed cat. The treaty itself looks like it was forged in a blacksmith's forge due to the sheer weight of it. Multiple pages that could practically double as weights in your local gym. And yes, the gym that only the most dedicated of individuals dare attend. Every keystroke of the treaty is an argument about who owes whom for the pleasure of having been involved in this epic global quarrel. Have you ever awkwardly split a bill at dinner with friends? Multiply that anxiety by 1,000. Now, imagine your friend insists you owe them for that one drink they barely touched because you mistakenly thought it was your drink. That's kind of how it felt when the Allies decided that Germany alone should shoulder the entire financial burden. Germany must cough up 132 billion gold marks, or about $442 billion now, if you count inflation and the cost of living in overpriced coffee shops. Because nothing says let's work together like handing someone a tab even your financial advisor would clutch their pearls over. And shockingly, the Germans weren't thrilled about that. Expressing their gratitude with a hearty laugh, followed by a generous helping of upturned noses. But let's not overlook the creativity in the treaty negotiations. Imagine a group of delegates trying to convince each other that going with the "let's guilt-trip them into paying" strategy was the best move. It's akin to convincing your cat that the vet is where all the cool felines hang out after just having taken them on an unexpected ride. As protesters outside the French palace lined up, it could have doubled as an impromptu comedy show as the mediators debated the appropriate amount of punishment. The stakes were as high as a cat on a rooftop trying to figure out how to get down. Now picture these negotiations stirring a pot thick enough to serve as both a colloquy and a cautionary tale. A boiling stew of humiliation. The great powers were adamant. You practically wrecked the joint. Pay up. Meanwhile, Germany roared. Politely, of course, because they were in a diplomatic kind of mood. About the looming catastrophe waiting at the door. Making them sound like a bad actor, begging for a refund for their last performance. As humor and despair wove their way through the corridors, one could almost hear the underlying sentiment. We should really rethink this peace treaty business. It's like giving your cousin who always steals your snacks the keys to your fridge. Spoiler, it never ends well. Before you know it, the ink dries on this monument to regret, and history rolls its eyes, knowing that opening this floodgate was akin to inviting a bull into a porcelain shop. This treaty, this bulky fist of justice, was destined to be as popular as soggy bread at a picnic. You won't believe it. Almost immediately, the repercussions echoed across Europe, giving rise to instability, extreme nationalism, and a fertile breeding ground for a sequel of a world war that had just concluded. It's like a bad movie franchise that simply refuses to die. And there you are, witnessing the solemn handshakes and stiff nods around this monumental document, knowing it probably didn't even come with a money-back guarantee. Diet margaritas and broken peace treaties. Who in their right mind thought that was a winning combination? But oh, you can't make this up. And just like that, history rolls on, leaving us questioning who to root for. If only we could reenact this comedy of errors with a touch of razzle-dazzle. Chapter 3. The Global Fever Dream of 1920s. Hey guys, welcome back to your history dreamland, the place where even the most chaotic eras in time get a touch of whimsical absurdity. Tonight, We're jumping into a whirlpool of jazz and flappers, a decade so vibrant it would make a peacock look pale by comparison. Yes, we're diving headfirst into the 1920s, a time when the air buzzed with excitement, speakeasies were in full swing, and creativity flourished faster than the number of ways to avoid a phone call from your uncle asking for a small loan. Before we unleash the wild parties and hushed whispers of the past, go ahead and give that like button a gentle poke, subscribe, and consider leaving a comment, but only if you actually enjoy it. We're not trying to guilt-trip you like a parent over the last slice of pizza. Now, dim those lights, crank up that gentle fan, because who doesn't want ambient wind while they try to catch some Z's, and get snugly cozy? Picture the roaring 20s. How did people navigate the complexities of life, love, and prohibition? Were they all just inventing new cocktails, or hiding secret stash of giggle water behind their petticoats? What was the actual smell of a speakeasy? Congealed fun and questionable cologne, perhaps? And finally, how many people accidentally mismatched their shoes while dancing the Charleston? Congratulations! You've just woken up in the dazzling summer of 1925, right in the heart of the roaring 20s. Your surroundings burst with the color of flapper dresses and the sound of jazz-soaked laughter echoing through the haze of smokes and dreams. Yeah, that's right. You can practically taste the gin on your tongue. Well, ideally, you shouldn't be tasting it unless you've snagged a clandestine victory in this secret world. Let's talk about the speakeasies, hidden dens of debauchery that were essentially the secret clubs of a generation, where the drinks flowed like it was happy hour all day long. Picture it. You're gliding through a door disguised as a bookcase, complete with the creaky, oh-so-necessary, dramatic entrance. The air is thick with the sweet and sour tang of bootleg liquor, not exactly top shelf, mind you. If you were lucky, you'd snag a seat near the band, where a guy with a slicked-back hairstyle and an impressive collection of saxophones serenades you while the room sways to the beat of jazz. Ah, the flappers! Those daredevil women whose fashion choices were as radical as their ideas. Were they channeling a fierce desire for freedom, or were they just mad that no one ever said, "Hey, let's ditch the corsets"? It's like they threw together the festive attire of a party with the elasticity of a rubber band. No wonder they threw caution to the wind while trying to get a good dance in. Just imagine a sea of bobbed hair bobbing up and down, all while clinking champagne glasses filled with forbidden bubbly. But on the flip side of this dazzling party atmosphere, a darker shadow lurked. Europe was still mired in post-war woes. For every flapper dancing on tables, there were somber figures staring into darkened windows, their brows furrowed like someone who just realized they forgot to send a birthday card. It's like inviting the fun police to your bash. Instead of getting the party started, they were just there to remind everyone that the world was still in a precarious place. With Germany reeling from economic disaster, thanks Treaty of Versailles, you forgettable paperweight, the contentious politics were brewing with a bitterness that could stir even the most spirited cocktail. You might picture a group of European dignitaries, their anger bubbling like poorly brewed coffee, staring out at the glitzy world of flappers and jazz. What do they have to celebrate, they might grumble, while downing a cup of espresso stronger than any modern-day coffee shop could handle. Because in their view, the endless parties felt about as appropriate as bringing a piñata to a funeral. Was there ever a moment when the flappers considered what was happening across the ocean? That, my friend, we may never know. But just imagine them twirling around the dance floor, laughing while a somber figure mutters, "You all will see the repercussions for this frivolity eventually." It's like that friend who can't help but rain on everyone's parade, always eager to remind you that life isn't as carefree as it seems. As you drift deeper into this vibrantly absurd world, picture the sound of laughter intertwined with the murmurs of anxiety wafting through the air. A mishmash of joy and tension, battling for supremacy, like macaroni and cheese fighting for attention at a fancy dinner party. Yes, the 1920s thrived on the fine line between celebration and chaos, much like your last office party, where someone tried to impress the boss with their interpretive dance moves. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more absurd, let's circle back to the characters. Imagine a flapper and a middle-aged European gentleman getting into a philosophical debate over, of all things, the appropriateness of short skirts, at a time when the world was still mourning lost generations. It's like mixing oil and water, completely incongruous, but somehow it all blends into something humorously awkward, like dancing the tango on a trampoline. So there you are, caught in this historical fever dream, where laughter and despair mingle under the glimmer of jazz lights, reminding you that the human experience has always had layers, some sweet, some sour, but all downright entertaining. Well, isn't history fascinating? And speaking of fascinating, let's uncover the next chapter, where roads will twist, turns will baffle, and somehow there's always that one relative you never knew you had that seems to turn up at the most inconvenient moments. Chapter 4, The Economic Tsunami and the Jenga Towers of Finance. Hey guys, welcome back to this wild ride we call history, where serious events swirl around like confetti in a particularly chaotic parade. Tonight we're diving into the turbulent waters of the 1930s, a decade when people were more in tune with beans than with their dreams of prosperity. Yes, we're about to explore a time when financial markets had melted down faster than your relationship with that last slice of cake at the office party. Before we launch ourselves into this economic comedy of errors, give that like button a gentle nudge, subscribe, and if you're feeling particularly generous, leave a comment, but only if you actually enjoy this, because we're not trying to give you any undue pressure, unlike your mother constantly asking if you found a good job yet. Now, dim those lights, set your fan on mild breeze, and shuffle into that cozy blanket like it's a suit of armor against the world. Have you ever wondered what a banker at the end of a bad fiscal quarter might have in common with an acrobat juggling flaming torches? Or how a sudden stock market crash can feel like that moment your internet drops during a crucial Zoom call? And let's not ignore the most vital question of all. When was the last time you tried to eat an emotional support chocolate bar while pretending it was a nutritious meal? Congratulations! You've just woken up in the autumn of 1929, right after that moment when the big shots of Wall Street decided to take capitalism for a thrill ride that would make roller coasters look like kiddie rides. Picture the stock exchange bustling like a hive of caffeinated bees, with traders wielding their ticker tape machines as if they were futuristic weapons designed for a personal economic apocalypse. The sound of excitement rings through the air like a brass band marching to an offbeat tune, while everyone around you wears a smile that says, "Can you believe we're all millionaires today?" But Much like that awkward moment when you realize you've been talking about your new haircut and it's been a hat all along, the facade will soon crumble. Let's talk about the banks. Oh, the banks. Imagine them as towering Jenga towers, stacked high with blocks labeled confidence and irrational exuberance. Just a slight nudge, and the whole structure could come crashing down. Bankers are practically balancing on stilts as they shout, "Buy, buy," while hiding their panic behind a confident grin. And then, bam! It all goes sideways. The stock market crashes right before your very eyes, sending banknotes fluttering down like autumn leaves. With every dollar that spirals downwards, you almost expect to see a small child with a basket, collecting them like the world's worst version of a scavenger hunt, complete with a sign that reads, "We'll trade for candy." The factories you pass on your way home aren't exactly radiant symbols of industry anymore. They're more like sad little dogs left outside in the rain. The once bustling assembly lines stand still, abandoned machines mourning their lost purpose, like the soul of a forgotten robot that just wanted to be a rock star. Workers who had just minutes ago worn suits of pride and ambition are now donning the universal attire of despair. Haggard expressions, frayed sleeves, and a desperate hope that the economy comes rolling back around, maybe like an old friend returning from a long trip, only this time they forgot to bring candy. You may catch the faint smell of burnt toast wafting around, a reminder of families trying to cook dinner with whatever stale bread is lurking at the back of the pantry. As the night rolls in, what might normally be the soothing sound of crickets outside has morphed into the desperate whispers of people discussing their financial woes. You think your budget is tight? Try living until payday on 2 dried beans and a sense of anxiety. The absurdity of it all is almost comical. Stocks plummeting is less like an upward spiral and more like watching a sad puppy slide down a snowy hill, confused, slippery, and slightly alarming. Imagine the scenes on Wall Street. It's like a wild circus act hanging by a thread, quite literally. Traders swinging their arms wildly, shouting phrases that have no real meaning, convinced that if they clap hard enough, the economy will perk up and do a little dance for them like an over-caffeinated cheerleader. It's not just the businessmen who are caught in this comical nightmare either. Regular folks are approaching life with the same disbelief as someone who finds themselves in an escape room filled with food riddles. It's confusing, frustrating, and honestly not at all what you signed up for. And as all this chaos unfurls around you, remember the humor within the tragedy, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humans possess an innate ability to find the absurd and laugh in its face. Just like a sitcom replaying its most ridiculous moments when the credits roll, you can't help but wonder, how did we survive? As you drift away from this episode of human folly, the taste of crushed optimism mingles with the air of uncertainty, creating a strange concoction of hustle, comedy, and unexpected resilience. Life has always been a balance of laughter and tears, though it occasionally tiptoes right off the edge of absurdity, much like the entirety of the 1930s. Now, let's tuck ourselves into the next act of this historical play, where promises of peace and prosperity ripple through the globe like whispers of a bad R&B song. Buckle up. It's about to get more hilariously complicated than trying to convince your cat to take a bath. Chapter 5. Mussolini's Black Shirts and Megalomania. Hey guys, welcome back to another fantastically bewildering journey through history, where the past unfolds like a badly timed sitcom that somehow still makes sense. Sort of. Tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic theater of the 1930s and 1940s, a time when political figures were more dramatic than the average reality show contestant, and where certain mustachioed leaders turned grandeur and ego into an art form that would make even the most flamboyant peacock blush. Yes, we're talking about Benito Mussolini and his infamous black shirts, who marched through history like they were strutting down the runway at Milan Fashion Week, only with considerably less grace and a lot more aggression. Now, before you dive headfirst into this dramatic tale that's tougher to navigate than a conversation about politics at Thanksgiving, go ahead and give that like button a gentle poke. Consider subscribing for more of these hilarious strolls through time, and drop a comment if you find yourself chuckling into your pillow, but only if you truly enjoy it. We wouldn't want to pressure you more than a used car salesman trying to offload a lemon, now would we? All right, dim those lights, crank the fan on gentle breeze, and snuggle into your blanket like you're an overstuffed burrito. Picture yourself in Italy during the 1930s, where every public gathering feels like a family reunion, filled with a lot of shouting, but very little actual conversation. Have you ever tried to express your feelings through interpretive dance after having one too many espressos? Or wondered what it's like to wear a black shirt as a uniform, only to realize it's more practical for barbecue stains than actual political rallies? How about trying to blend a love of pasta with a very serious longing for world domination? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1922, in the midst of a nation buzzing with excitement and confusion, all wrapped up in a cloak of somber seriousness. The air is thick with the smell of optimism, fear, and just a hint of garlic, as Benito Mussolini, larger than life and brimmed with what historians might call megalomania, stands before a vast crowd. His chin is thrust forward like a medieval knight bravely charging into battle, with a pair of eyebrows so enthusiastic they might just take off and start a circus. Let's talk about Mussolini's followers, those black shirts. It's like they took a dose of caffeinated enthusiasm and put it on a diet of iron-fisted ideology. Picture a misplaced fraternity trying desperately to be taken seriously while wearing the most menacing-looking button-ups they could find. The black shirts marched through the streets with all the elegance of a marching band at halftime, but instead of glorifying the game, they were making a power play that felt more theatrical than decisive. Imagine you're at one of Mussolini's grand rallies, a sort of over-the-top combination of a rock concert and a political rally, with banners flapping in the breeze like they were engaged in a fierce boxing match against the local weather. The atmosphere vibrates with regretful joy, like a party where the punch bowl has been spiked with a generous dose of oppression. You can hear the chants echoing around you, whooping and clapping, as Mussolini delivers speeches more dynamic than your morning pep talks about tackling the workday. But the truth? It's a little chaotic. While he's up there spouting off about Italy's revival, you can't help but think, was that last sentence about Italian excellence, or just a weird metaphor about pickled vegetables? The comical piece of it all is how seriously everyone takes it. It's like watching a magician that just can't quite pull the rabbit out of the hat, but insists he's the greatest illusionist in the world. But wait, it gets even better. As Mussolini waves his arms and turns the crowd into a mass of fervent supporters, there's an invisible clock ticking down to catastrophe. Like trying to put a buffet on a tiny table, the weight of expectations is about to topple over. You see, while the crowd is entranced, countries across Europe are bracing themselves for something decidedly less entertaining. Much like a party where everyone agreed to play games but got distracted watching a cat refuse to catch a laser pointer, world powers are locked in their own games of intimidation and desperation. Mussolini's shimmering vision of a revived Italy leads to a series of alliances and tensions, much like awkward conversations that spiral out of control. Remember that time your friends decided to team up against a board game villain, only to find themselves at each other's throats over the most ludicrous of disagreements? The geopolitics of the 1930s was just a grander, albeit more dangerous version of that scenario. And as the black shirts march on like an overly confident group trying to start a line dance at a funeral, you can almost foresee the disastrous consequences. If you squint just right, you can see them setting the stage for the next global fiasco, like a poorly written play that keeps getting produced year after year because no one has the heart to cut it. Historic alliances are forged in hilariously ill-advised negotiations, with world leaders sending out diplomatic notes as if they're just trying to figure out who will bring what to the potluck. So as you drift away from this scene of ego-fueled pageantry and overzealous uniforms, remember that history is a cocktail of absurdity, and sometimes the punchline comes a little too late. Although the black shirts strutted on their imaginary catwalk of self-importance, the world was about to take a comedic tumble into turmoil, and oh boy, it's going to be a wild ride. Let's cozy up for the next act of this historical circus, where the laughter of misfortune teases us like a naughty wind whispering secrets of impending chaos. Buckle up, because the play is about to take some unexpected turns, and it might just be the funniest, if slightly more tragic, ride of all. Chapter 6. Hitler Ranting in a Munich Beer Hall. Hey guys, welcome back to another fabulous, slightly absurd jaunt through history, where we sometimes wonder if all this chaos could be solved with just a solid group hug, or perhaps a pint of lager. Tonight, we're diving into the all-oozing, explosive atmosphere of 1920s Munich, where the beer flows like water, and the opinions are as frothy as the foam on top of your stein. Yes, it's the exhilaratingly chaotic scene where a young mustachioed man often takes to the stage to deliver impassioned rants that sound like a mixture of a bad soap opera and a dramatic poetry slam. Spoiler, it's definitely not stage fright. Before we hop onto this wildly twisted roller coaster, go ahead, give that like button a gentle poke. Subscribe for future hilarious misadventures, and drop us a line if something tickles your funny bone, but only if you're actually entertained. Our psychic powers aren't quite working yet for the whole mandatory vibe. Now, dim those lights, crank your fan to light breeze, and snuggle into your blanket like you're hiding from awkward family gatherings. Imagine the scent of sausage, mustard, and a hint of anticipation curling around you in a thick cloud of camaraderie. Have you ever pointed to the last slice of pizza at a party, only for it to turn into a full-contact sport? Or wondered what it's like to sip your beer while pretending you're not slowly losing your sanity, but instead claiming you're deep in existential thought? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1923, right in the heart of a Munich beer hall, where the mood swings between jovial and downright wild. Think Cheers meets Game of Thrones, but with more foam and fewer dragons. As you take in your surroundings, you can see a plethora of patrons clinking their glasses and belting out folk songs like they're auditioning for a musical revival. The room feels alive with exaggerated gesticulations and youthful fervor. And in the corner, there's a young Adolf Hitler, whose energy could be mistaken for someone who just downed an entire trampoline's worth of energy drinks. Picture him stalking the wooden stage, his fervor growing like that time you tried to impress your friends with your rendition of an 80s power ballad. I mean, it's not pretty, but hey, there's a lot of heart. Let's take a moment here for the sensory experience. The air is thick with the scent of fresh pretzels, smoke from far too many cigarettes, and the unmistakable aroma of desperation mingling with ambition, like a sour mash meeting a half-heartedly prepared cocktail. You can hear the clattering of mugs hitting tables, laughter mixing with gruff, half-shouted conversations, and the occasional argument breaking out about whether the last Oktoberfest was indeed the greatest to date, or just an excuse to indulge. As he gestures wildly, Hitler's words crash over you like a rogue wave at the beach, leaving you half-drenched and slightly bewildered. "Betrayal," he cries, punctuating his rants with emphatic finger-pointing and bizarre facial expressions, reminiscent of a high school theater kid trying to embody the essence of Shakespeare after 3 espressos. You can't help but wonder, is this a political meeting or the world's most intense karaoke night? And just like those ill-fated karaoke attempts, his charisma is hard to look away from, even if your brain is desperately begging you to tune out. The crowd is hypnotized, leaning in, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of adoration and confusion, as if they're trying to decipher the ingredients of a really off-brand sandwich. What is this? Is it meat? Why is it green? More importantly, why is everyone suddenly excited about it? As Hitler rants about the injustices of the world, it's like being thrust onto an emotional roller coaster that just won't quit. "We've been wronged. We shall rise," he proclaims, gesticulating with the kind of fervor that suggests he might be auditioning for the part of passionate revolutionary in a particularly intense docudrama. The patrons, showing signs of communal madness, nod enthusiastically, as though they are sifting through grains of truth found in his meandering sentences. Truth that seems to tumble out like that spaghetti forgotten in boiling water, clumpy and not quite right. But amid the fervor, you can't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. It's like being transported to a family reunion where your eccentric uncle commandeers the conversation, but instead of reminiscing about the good old days, he's musing on world domination while attempting to balance 3 pretzels and a stein on his head. You almost want to shout, "How is this the most popular attraction in Munich?" As patrons chant fervently, raising their mugs like they're in a Germanic rendition of a college football game, one wonders if they're fully aware of the darkness flickering just beneath the surface of these gatherings. They're caught in a frenzy of misplaced confidence, a sugar rush fueled by nationalism and a hearty drink. Ever experience that feeling after a night out when you end up agreeing to things you should never have even considered? That's right, join the club. Yet the laughter and excitement mask an undercurrent of madness that's inching closer to tragedy like a poorly timed punchline. In this intoxicating cocktail of ideologies, the world is teetering on the brink of chaos. The buzzing enthusiasm among your neighbors is a double-edged sword, strikingly entertaining, but also rife with the weight of what's to come. As the beer hall swells with raucous laughter and fervent applause, it feels like you're witnessing the opening act of a historically disastrous soap opera. And somewhere behind those stern, passionate eyes lies the tragic punchline, an undeniable glimpse of upheaval lurking in the shadows, waiting for the curtain to rise on a far more sinister episode. So as you take a step back from this tableau of absurdity, remember that history is a comedy, filled with the most baffling characters, often stumbling through their own making. Just like that one time you thought tank tops were still in style. Amazing to watch, but tragically misguided. Let's settle in for the next chapter of this historical saga, where the laughter continues, and find out how this round of tumult leads us directly into the next global whoopsie-daisy. Chapter 7. Japan invades Manchuria, 1931. Hey guys, welcome back to another frosty dip into history's whimsical waters, where the drama thickens faster than a soup made by your least favorite relative. Tonight, prepare yourselves for a tale more chilling than your ex's heart on a cold winter evening: the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. It's a story of imperial ambition, frozen plains, and a complete disregard for personal space that will leave you questioning the sanity of it all. Before we're thrust into this wintry tableau, go ahead and give that like button a gentle poke. Maybe even subscribe if you're in the mood for future historical escapades that might make you snort out your drink with laughter. Just don't snort out your tea in an important Zoom meeting, okay? And if something tickles your funny bone, drop us a note. But remember, only if you truly enjoyed our charming escapades. We appreciate honesty more than a well-cooked dumpling. Now that you've gotten cozy, dim those lights, crank your fan to light frostbite, and settle into your blankets like you're trying to hide from your responsibilities, or maybe just the latest tax forms. As we venture into the world of 1931, picture a time when folks sported fashion choices that would make you question their decisions, and the pin currency was apparently crafted from finely aged desperation. Let me ask you, have you ever stood in a long line for a bumpy ride at an amusement park only to discover it's closed? Or had your carefully planned picnic ruined by a surprise rainstorm? Well, imagine if those frustrations were amplified across nations. Yes, frustrations have a way of escalating into global catastrophes. And what better place to explore this notion than in the frozen expanses of Manchuria, where winter breezes had a flair for drama, and imperial ambition was a tad too zealous for its own good. Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1931, right in the heart of Manchuria, a stunning landscape where the hardiness of nature perfectly matched the stubbornness of the human creature. You spot Imperial Japanese soldiers standing defiantly amidst the frozen emptiness, their uniforms fluttering in the icy wind like the last dregs of hope. The horizon paints a backdrop of stark whites and grays, the clouds above brooding, as if contemplating what poor ideas were birthed from humanity. In this chilling tableau, the cold bites at your cheeks, a sharp contrast to your warm desires of comfortable living. It's like each gust whispers, "Good night, sweet dreams," and embrace futility. Suddenly, the heavy boots of the soldiers crunch on the snow, creating symphonies of thunderous footsteps, eerily echoing in the silence, like the world's most intense tap dance audition at a funeral. Now, let's talk about the food, or lack thereof. The Japanese forces arrived with grand visions of conquest, but had about as much culinary planning as a toddler left alone with a box of crayons. Manchuria, rich in resources, wasn't a buffet spread, but they seemed to think they could simply take what they wanted without so much as a polite "please." Imagine a team of overly ambitious chefs storming a Michelin star restaurant, declaring that the chef's special would now include a side of international relations and a sprinkle of chaos. The irony is rich here, almost like your Aunt Gertrude's fruitcake, tasty on the surface, but a total disaster when you dig deeper. With unprecedented audacity, the Japanese decided to winterize their invasion, like putting the icing on a bad cake. They figured whatever resistance they faced would simply be overcome by a few military tactics, sprinkled with a dash of bravado. And honestly, that's like trying to bake bread without yeast, deliciously misguided. As the forces swarmed and skirmished, the local populace was watching, confused and slightly annoyed. It was as if your neighbor decided to host an impromptu fireworks display in the middle of the night, and all you wanted was a quiet evening with your Netflix documentaries. The tension crackled in the air, a frozen wire stretched, waiting to snap. Just think of it as an overcooked dinner that would never be served, leaving everyone awkwardly pacing in the room, desperately avoiding eye contact. In their attempts to impose order, Japan aimed to transform Manchuria into a puppet state, but you could say it felt more like turning an unwilling marionette classic into a low-budget horror film. It became a spectacle where everyone asked, "Why are we doing this?" Yet no one really knew the answer. The local populace just wished for a warm meal instead of Cold War leftovers, and who could blame them? Now imagine that you're trying to share a table at a bustling restaurant, only to be met with a brawl breaking out over who gets the last dumpling. This was essentially what was happening in the global theater. Disputes erupting from disagreements across Cold War fronts, each country clamoring for their slice of power, with as much grace as a hippo trying to dance ballet. The historical absurdity was utterly entertaining, almost like watching an overly dramatic soap opera, with low-budget production quality unfolding at a leisurely pace. And just when you think the madness is contained to the icy battlefields, news of this invasion permeated through the layers of societies, like melted cheese bubbling over on a neglected lasagna. The entire world perked up, like someone had just announced the next great irony in a comedy show. Countries gathered in condemnation, wagging fingers, but none were quite prepared to intervene. Sounds a lot like debates in group chats over the best pizza toppings, doesn't it? So let's grab a cup of hot cocoa as we sit back and wonder how a chilling image of soldiers standing defiantly in the biting cold hinted at future debacles to come. In the sweeping drama of these frozen plains, the absurdity of ambition collided head-on with the mundane hilarity of human flaws. And you know what? It was just getting warmed up, or more accurately, chilled down. Now, keep your blankets close and stay tuned, because the powers at play were just gearing up for an epic showdown that would lead straight to the festering wound of World War II. But hey, don't stress. It's not like this chaotic pattern had become a recurring theme or anything. We're in for quite the ride together on this historical roller coaster. Let's see how it all unfolds.
Chapter 8. Chamberlain waving a piece of paper. Hey guys, welcome back to another charming jaunt through history's mildly humorous labyrinth, where even the darkest eras can surprise you with a punchline sharper than a historian's quill. Tonight we diverge from the biting cold of Manchuria, landing softly in sunny Britain, at the brink of World War II. You know, the war that had as many plot twists as a soap opera, but even more dramatic haircuts. Tonight's tale features our main character, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, a man whose fashion sense was like an unmade bed and whose diplomatic flair soon became the butt of historical jokes. Can you imagine showing up for a roller coaster ride, only to discover it was just a kiddie ride with no hills? That's essentially how Chamberlain felt after waving a flimsy piece of paper proclaiming, "Peace for our time." Spoiler alert, results may vary. So before we meander down this amusing path, why not give that like button a gentle nudge? Feel free to subscribe and drop a comment, but only if you genuinely enjoyed our delightful tales. Honesty is the bedrock of friendship, or so they say. Just don't go getting your tea blend wrong in the comments. That could spark an entire Facebook war. Now that you're all settled in for a night of mildly absurd historical hilarity, dim your lights, set your fan to explore Arctic conditions, and snuggle up like you're about to get cozy with a tax audit that's just a few weeks overdue. Picture yourself back in the pre-war era, a time when people sported mustaches the size of small animals, and a cup of tea often finished off a heated debate about whether or not the neighbor's garden gnomes had communist ties. Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1938. Ah, the year when Neville Chamberlain triumphantly disembarked from an airplane carrying a single sheet of paper, like a magician revealing the world's worst magic trick. You can almost hear the crowd's anticipation, perhaps searching for a rabbit, or at least a decent excuse for why peace had yet to be achieved. Picture it now. A sunny day, bright skies, and the weight of impending doom on his shoulders. It's like stepping outside on a promising morning, only to realize you've completely forgotten to wear pants. As you scan the scene, Chamberlain is beaming like a proud dad whose child just won a participation trophy. He waves that paper around like it's the latest iPhone, completely oblivious to the fact that in a month or two, it would be worth about as much as used toilet paper. The crowd cheers excitedly, convinced that peace is just a title away, while you stand there cracking up silently thinking, bless his heart, he's really going for it. Meanwhile, back in Germany, there's a little corporate retreat going on with a fellow named Adolf Hitler, who, let's just say, was not handing out cookies and milk during this gathering. So while Chamberlain's waving that paper like a flag of surrender, Hitler is eyeing Europe like a kid in a candy store, claiming, "Mine, all mine." It's like watching your neighbor mow their lawn, while their dog is digging a hole right through your fence. You can't help but wonder, how much longer until everything goes sideways? Let's talk about Chamberlain's approach to diplomacy, or lack thereof, because it is as entertaining as it is misguided. He thought appeasement would work, like offering a toddler an extra cookie to avoid a temper tantrum. Here, little Adolf, just take a slice of Czechoslovakia. Be a good boy, and we can all share ice cream later. This is not how international relations work, but hey, who wouldn't love a scoop of chocolate caramel diplomacy? Now, if you could channel your inner historical critic, you'd be like, Neville, my dude, maybe the solution doesn't involve tossing parts of your neighbors to the wolves while hoping they'll just go home for nap time. But alas, common sense was in short supply, just like stylish pants during a World War II-era photo op. As Chamberlain proclaimed peace like it was a new Netflix series topping the charts, the reality was a little different. Historians now love to poke fun at this moment, the kind of laughter laced with sympathetic disbelief, akin to watching a cat try to conquer a dog while wearing a wizard costume. The absurdity deepens when you consider the lengths to which people went to believe Chamberlain. It's like participating in a scavenger hunt only to discover the last prize is a rubber chicken
instead of a $100 gift card. Chamberlain waved that paper, and the world collectively cheered, clad in denial, hoping fervently that this would be the great unraveling of the pre-war tensions. Meanwhile, Hitler was working busily on his holiday plans to expand his Germany by Design tour. Oh, the irony was thicker than the fog on a chilly London morning. Now you can imagine the endless discussions in salons and tea-houses, where townsfolk debated the significance of that piece of paper like it was the next episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. "Isn't it beautiful?" one might say. "Peace for our time. How quaint." The baker would drop a loaf of bread mid-conversation, exclaiming, "Don't be silly. Things can't be that easy." And every time someone uttered Chamberlain's name, the ghosts of historical irony giggled softly from the sidelines. As the sun begins to set over our little piece of historical chaos, let's reflect. Chamberlain's optimistic wave is a symbol of that wonderfully absurd human trait, believing against all odds that a flimsy promise can hold back the tide of certain doom. May we all hold tight to our own pieces of paper. May they symbolize hope, humor, or perhaps even a reminder that political antics can sometimes be more entertaining than a comedy show. So settle in, my friends, because as this story unfolds, you'll soon find out just how deep the rabbit hole goes. And, spoiler alert, history often has a knack for making fools of even the best intentions. Buckle up, for we're just getting started. Chapter 9. The Secret Handshake You Didn't Want to See. Hey guys, welcome back to another excursion through history's mildly interesting corridors. Tonight's exploration is so bizarre, it makes a cat in a shark costume look downright normal. Get ready to settle in as we unravel the strange pact between two leaders whose fashion statements were less fashion-forward and more fashion-floundering. Now, imagine a world where world leaders were like two kids squabbling over the last slice of pizza, except instead of pizza, it's a whole continent, and instead of sharing, they're secretly plotting how to slice it up like a particularly complicated birthday cake. But hold on. Before we jump into the meat of this absurd saga, let's check those engagement knobs. Go ahead and give that like button a gentle poke. Subscribe if you're intrigued, or drop a comment if you remain bewildered by history as we are. Just remember, only if you're actually enjoying this friendly history roast. All right, dim those lights, cozy up in your blanket fort, and set your fan to Arctic gale. I can almost hear your mind spiraling with questions, some as kooky as a raccoon masquerading as a banker. What if history's most notorious leaders had a LinkedIn page? What connections would they be making? Would Stalin brag about his team-building skills under extreme duress, while Hitler tries to coerce the whole of Eastern Europe onto his clients I've domination for list? But also, why is it so easy to manipulate a map with two disheveled leaders? Are we really considering it like a twisted game of Battleship? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1939. A year where handshakes turned into secret back-alley deals, and countless world leaders were asking themselves, what have I gotten into this time? You'll find yourself in a dimly lit room,
where two figures stand over a map of Eastern Europe. It's not a cozy think tank vibe. It feels more like the most awkward date you've ever experienced. On one side, we have Joseph Stalin, with a moustache that seems to have a personality of its own, looking like he just walked out of a Soviet Pinterest board. And on the other, Adolf Hitler, sporting a hairdo that looks like a rat just met a hairdryer in a dark alley. You know how when two people are stuck in a silent car ride, the awkward tension rises to comedic heights? Well, multiply that by 100 and toss in a geopolitical crisis, as Stalin and Hitler exchange glances that say, "Yeah, so we're totally not gonna kill each other." They lean over the map, clearly doing their best to pretend they belong in this awkward shopping mall of alliances. Let's talk about the map they're drawing on, shall we? It's like an elementary school project gone wrong. Their dividing line isn't some sleek ruler's edge. It resembles a jagged scrawl, like a toddler being let loose with a box of crayons. 1 minute, they're arguing over Poland, and the next they're squabbling about who gets to keep the puppy. "I'll take Prussia, and you can have the rest," can almost be heard floating in the air. But folks, lest you think the agreement was as simple as, why don't we split Eastern Europe like a set of twins splitting dessert? Let's delve into the complexities. It's as if you're at a potluck dinner, and instead of bringing a dish, these two had the audacity to bring global chaos and decide who gets which starvation rations. As they shake on it with a grin, you can almost hear the universe sighing, "Oh, this is gonna go splendidly." Now take a moment to visualize this handshake. It's not the kind of handshake that inspires confidence, oh no. It's more like those over-enthusiastic handshakes that make you question if the person has any bones left in their wrists. Both leaders clasping hands with grim smiles, as if they're about to take family photos at a wedding, all while planning an increasingly convoluted game of how to dominate the world. Is it just me, or does it sound like a bad B-movie? Even their sentiment around this handshake rings out with humor. Stalin must have thought he'd struck gold, saying something slick like, "This will be a fine partnership. It'll give us both wonderful stories to tell our grandkids. Like how I ruined a few lives with a smile." Meanwhile, Hitler was grinning as though he just found out dessert was still on the table, instead of being whipped away after dinner. You can almost picture him thinking, "Maybe I can keep my war crimes under wraps if I have a friend here." And let's not forget the absurdity of the very idea behind the pact. While they drew their jagged line on a map, history would go ahead and one-up both of them quicker than a race car leaving a stoplight. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was so temporary it could have been used in a children's magic show. The illusion of peace showered with confetti just before disappearing in a puff of smoke. As you drift off into dreams of geopolitical fiascos involving dubious figures and sketchy handshakes, remember, history has its own sense of humor. And this chapter is just a reminder that careful planning can often lead to wildly absurd outcomes. So take a moment to reflect on this quirky intersection, where fate takes a sharp turn into utter nonsense. And sleep on, dear compatriots,
for tomorrow we'll traverse even further down this comically dark journey. Chapter 10. The Blitzkrieg Polish Catastrophe. Speeding panzers and screaming Stukas. Hey guys, welcome back to yet another delightful jaunt through the mildly concerning chapters of history. Tonight, we're diving headlong into a scene more chaotic than an over-caffeinated octopus trying to juggle bowling pins. Get comfortable, because we're about to travel back to a time where the phrase peaceful negotiations had all the reliability of a three-legged chair. Now, before we plow headfirst into the pandemonium of World War II, let's take a moment to consider what life must have been like if you were a Polish citizen who suddenly found yourself living the extreme version of keep calm and carry on. Have you ever tried to enjoy a Sunday stroll only to have a speedboat zoom by you on a calm lake? Imagine that, except the boat is a tank, and instead of a serene weekend, it's a full-blown invasion. So settle down in your cozy blanket burrito, dim those lights to slightly sinister, and don't forget to fan yourself like you're about to get a surprise visit from that one relative who thinks sharing entails dropping off their entire collection of cats at your doorstep. As you drift into these historical misadventures, ponder the absurdity of wartime life. What if you were in a cafe, sipping your espresso, and suddenly your local barista is replaced by a soldier yelling about your imminent doom? Would you still ask for the croissant with extra butter? Congratulations, you've just woken up on September 1st, 1939. A day that would catapult the world into a frenzy, much like a herd of goats when they hear the word treats. Outside your window, the sun is barely peeking through the clouds, but little do you know, it's also casting ominous shadows on what's about to become a lightning storm of chaos. Let's talk about the atmosphere, shall we? The faint metallic scent of fear hangs in the air, mixing with the smell of baking bread from a nearby bakery, a stark reminder that life goes on even as the storm clouds gather. It's almost poetic if you squint hard enough. You can hear the distant rumble of engines, a sound that, under normal circumstances, might just mean traffic. But today, it's the roaring engines of German panzers, those sleek metallic behemoths that seem to glide across the fields with far too much grace for something that looks ready to squash you flat. Suddenly, the low drone overhead signals that something is amiss. A Stuka dive bomber screams down from the sky, and it's not playing around. It's as if someone took a very angry goose, slapped on Nazi insignia, and sent it after you. The noise is deafening, so loud that you might as well be trying to enjoy a soft symphony played on a kazoo inside a marching band. When it dives, the world seems to tilt, and you could swear the ground is murmuring a warning laugh. Now picture this lovely scene. You're standing in the middle of a field, feeling like an overcooked potato floating helplessly in a boiling pot, while tanks are charging towards you like enthusiastic puppies at a dog park. Panzers aren't just slow-moving chunks of metal. No, they're rolling at high speed, crushing everything in their wake. Meanwhile, the Polish defenses, bless their hearts, are scrambling to respond, feeling like roosters trying to take on a packed lunch of hungry owls. The panzer's treads are a nasty but impressive symphony of destruction, creating a rhythm that is equal parts chaotic and impressive, mostly the former. Let's pause for a moment of humor here. Did anyone take the time to consider the poor farmer just trying to plow his land, only to find it suddenly replaced by a battleground? One moment,
he's chasing away crows. The next, he's having to dodge tanks like it's the worst game of dodgeball ever played. And to think, just a week earlier, he was convinced that his biggest problem was a stubborn mole tunneling through his peas. And of course, we mustn't overlook the luxury of communications during this time. Commanders are shouting orders over the thunderings of war, sounding about as coherent as someone who's just taken a cannonball to the gut. And the radio operators fiddling with their knobs are probably sending out messages that are as garbled as a politician trying to apologize for something entirely unreasonable. All you can hear is chaos, screams mixing with the horrifyingly catchy tune of the Horst Wessel lead. But in the end, it's the aftermath that truly delivers the gut punch. Once the dust settles and you blink your eyes clear, the field you were once familiar with now looks more like a bizarre art installation made by a child on a sugar high. The trees that were once landmarks now resemble salad tossed with reckless abandon. And as you sit amidst the ruins, you can't help but think of that idyllic bread aroma wafting through the air. Only now, it carries an undertone of smoke that says, well, this took a turn for the tragic. So, let this bizarre panorama of war serve as a reminder to you, dear dreamer, of how easily life can shift from making plans to dodging history's metaphorical and literal tanks. And with that, may you find peace amongst this beautifully absurd chaos as you drift off to sleep, where thankfully the only panzer rolling through your dreams is likely made of chocolate and is somehow offering free treats. Sleep tight, and remember, history has a way of putting us in front-row seats to the world's most absurd show, complete with unexpected plot twists that leave us all scratching our heads.
Chapter 11. The Dunkirk Miracle of Deliverance, From Beaches to Barges. Hey guys, welcome back to yet another delightful escapade through the mildly absurd annals of history. Tonight, we're about to embark on a nautical adventure that's stickier than a honey-coated piano in a thunderstorm, the miraculous evacuation at Dunkirk. Buckle up, unless you're currently the captain of a small fishing boat, in which case that's already a familiar feeling. Before we dive in, let's consider this. Have you ever found yourself in a situation so chaotic that you wondered if the universe had pulled a prank on you? Like when you thought it was a great idea to take a shortcut and ended up navigating through a swamp of geese? You know, the kind that gives you more anxiety than deciding whether to order pizza or sushi on a Friday night. How about being stuck on a beach with thousands of bewildered soldiers, while the heroes of the day are, surprisingly, not the military, but a motley crew of civilians armed with little more than a desire to help, and a boat that probably had seen better days. Yes, we are talking about Dunkirk, 1940. So as you dim the lights and wrap yourself up like a burrito at a Mexican restaurant, let's transport you back to this wild time, where modern conveniences had taken a vacation long before anyone even considered Wi-Fi. Congratulations, you've just woken up, barring the sound of your alarm clock or the gentle nudges of reality, on the sandy beaches of Dunkirk, France. It's May of 1940, and the sky looks like it's been thrown into a blender of gray clouds. You might be thinking about sunbathing or building a sand castle like a 5-year-old. Spoiler alert, that is not in your job description today. Instead, you're surrounded by thousands of exhausted British and French soldiers, their uniforms looking less like military attire and more like an accidental art project featuring mud and sweat. Now let's talk about the sensory experience. The salty ocean breeze raises goosebumps on your arms, a welcome contrast to the alarming aroma wafting around you, thanks in part to a combination of sweat, fear, and, shall we say, last night's questionable rations. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the beach is undercut by an ominous drone, a reminder that those aren't seagulls squawking above. No, they're German Stukas, and they're not here to admire your choice of sunscreen. In the distance, you can hear the distant, deafening sound of engines. More specifically, the thunderous interval of German bombers swooping down like errant seagulls at a beach picnic, intent on ruining your day, and probably your life given the context. As you scuffle to find a more secure cocoon that loudly resembles a soldier's blanket, you can't help but wonder, how on earth did it come to this? Picture this. You've just settled into some sandy nook, probably not the sunlit tropical paradise you imagined. Soldiers are everywhere, looking a bit like extras from a bad war movie that forgot to hire continuity experts. Blank stares, mud-caked boots, and a shared tray of anxiety commingle on the sandy battleground. You spot the remnants of someone's lunch. Oh wait, that's not lunch. That's some rather unfortunate seaweed that didn't read the memo about timing. Trust me, that seaweed is about as helpful as a wet sock. Amidst the chaos, the British Expeditionary Force is brimming with so much confusion, you could bottle it up and market it as Dunkirk's anxiety juice. But here's the twist. Amidst the chaos comes hope, in the most unconventional forms. An armada of small boats, fishing vessels, pleasure cruisers, even a few rowboats that look like they're more suited for leisurely afternoons than a military rescue, is buzzing forth from England. Britain's civilians, showing up like unexpected heroes at a party, are prepared to rescue the stranded soldiers, as if recognizing that this is basically the world's grimiest game of go fetch. You see, many civilians, perhaps after a few too many pints at the pub, heard the call, deciding that maybe, just maybe, their fish and chips could wait a bit longer. You might even find your Aunt Edna buzzing along in her paddle boat, ready to snag soldiers like she's fishing for compliments. "Aren't these fellas heavy?" she chuckles, as she tips the boat precariously forward. Let's talk about mixed signals, shall we? On one hand, you have the steady marching orders, grim yet inspiring, from military leaders trying to orchestrate this chaotic rescue mission. And on the other, you have civilians arguing over whether to help a soldier into the boat with dignity, or just give him a shove and hope for the best. Ah, humanity at its finest. As the civilian fleet gathers, it's almost comedic to witness their resolve and determination. "Now, where are we going?" one sailor yells, had been hoping to find a nice fishing spot instead of serving as human lifeboats. Another is vehemently debating the best angle for docking. This is the moment he realizes it's less about angles and more about sheer luck. As they navigate through the onslaught of enemy fire, their hearts gallop like horses straight out of feudal times. Somehow, they've turned what seems like a grave episode into an unexpected come-together of humanity. A reminder that even during the darkest times, people can still band together, with the gusto and charm of a neighborhood watch meeting turned flash mob. History, as it often does,
serves a heaping portion of irony. In the face of enemy attacks and panic, the civilians' boats single-handedly orchestrate one of the largest rescues in military history. By sheer determination and stubbornness, or was it just bad directions, they successfully transport over 338,000 troops across the turbulent waters. So, as you drift into slumber, let this wild Dunkirk saga remind you that sometimes the most absurd heroes emerge from the unlikeliest circumstances, and perhaps, just perhaps, there might be a lesson here about community, courage, and the occasional need for a snack break. Sleep tight, dear dreamer, and remember, there's always a chance that the hero of the day could be your overly enthusiastic neighbor offering to help with your next home improvement project. Just don't have any seaweed on hand. Chapter 12. Winston Churchill, The Bulldog Roar. Hey guys, you've arrived at a moment in history that's tougher than your last gym membership. The World War II era. Picture it. A time when blimps were not just a thing you did to a balloon, but actual military vehicles, and sock shortages were somehow more devastating than a bad breakup. Remember the last time you tried to reason with a stubborn cab driver who insisted he knew a shortcut, but ended up taking you on a scenic route through the suburbs? Now, amplify that feeling of frustration by about 1,000. Mix in some bomb explosions, and you're in for a thrilling ride of absurdity. Before we plunge into this wild adventure, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you actually enjoy this, of course. No pressure. Now, dim the lights, put on your favorite fan, and get cozy as we traverse back to the 1940s, where every day was a gritty grey movie, featuring not-so-silent bombers more determined than your cat trying to steal your seat. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to stand with a cigar in your mouth as the world crumbles around you? Or how about dealing with such outrageous tension that your jaw could probably sever a cheeseburger in half? Do you think people back then complained about Wi-Fi and cell service drops when they saw their homes flattened? Or wondered if Churchill ever had a dull day, musing about what to have for lunch while standing amidst rubble? Spoiler alert. Lunch was likely less of a thought and more of a wishful dream. Congratulations. You've just woken up in London, 1940. And it's about as grim as it gets. You can almost taste the smoke lingering in the air. A blend of burnt toast and unresolved tension. As you shake off the cobwebs from your brain, your eyes adjust to the sight of Winston Churchill, the ultimate bulldog of English grit, standing defiantly before you. Now, visualize Churchill. He's looking like a granite gargoyle dressed in a suit that's seen more action than an overeager plumber on a holiday weekend. Picture him, cigar clenched between his teeth like a determined bulldog ready to face the postal carrier. Except in this context, the postal carrier is a whole battalion of warplanes. Trust me, no one ever said war would look good in a knitted sweater. The sounds around you are louder than a marching band on double espresso. The rhythmic thump of boots, stray dog barks, and the distant roar of blitzkrieg reverberating through the very air you breathe. You step outside, and the streets are a treacherous jigsaw of bombed buildings and debris, adorned with craters that look like Mother Nature's most unflattering approach to modern art. "Quite the charming place, eh?" you hear someone murmur to another. You realize they're taking cover, their teeth chattering even louder than they chatter. The smell of urgency hangs thickly in the air, mingled with something you can only describe as post-explosion chic. It's a trend that definitely hasn't caught on, thank goodness. As you watch Churchill, it becomes clear that this man has the resolve of someone trying to coax a cat out from under a bed. You can almost imagine him shaking a fist at the sky, demanding both respect from the enemy and a decent cup of tea. "We shall never surrender," echoes his gravelly voice, and you think, you tell them, buddy. Never mind that your own nerves are dancing like a startled rabbit in a room full of rocking chairs. But let us pause for a moment to discuss the attire of the day. Suits that seemed more suitable for a funeral than a battlefield, complemented by hats that looked like they had their own postal routes. How did anyone take anything seriously when they were dressed like they just stepped out of a discount haberdashery? And food, the rations. Imagine you're craving a 5-star Michelin meal, and instead being served mystery stew that could win awards for both texture and ambiguity. You wonder if they turned the leftovers from last week's dinner into a special kind of soup called Desperate Times, that, if you squinted hard enough, you could almost blend into a comforting bowl of nostalgia. Or at least, that's what your mind is trying to convince you, while simultaneously processing the realities of having to choose between a potato or a tin of sardines. Churchill, though, you have to admire the man's ingenuity. He navigated the challenges of wartime Britain with the charm of a bulldog, and resolve perhaps only matched by an unusually stubborn toddler refusing to share a toy. As he takes a drag from his cigar, you can almost see the gears turning in his mind. What's next? How do we keep hope alive amidst the barrage of chaos? It's undoubtedly a mental puzzle, perhaps even more complex than attempting to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. "Let's rally the troops," he declares, and your heart swells with pride. And, let's be real, a touch of absurdity. You can't help but picture him bursting into spontaneous song about making a great deal out of tomatoes while airborne, with the sheer determination to keep spirits high through the high-rise rubble of his city. Even amidst the direst of circumstances, there's a bizarre camaraderie that lives within these walls. Amid sirens and shouts, people are gathered, clothes singed and faces smeared with soot. But laughter, yes, they dare to laugh, a light in the shadows. It's almost like standing in the middle of a comedy club where the punchlines are casualties of war, both hilarious and tragic, and reality anchors itself deeply into the hearts of the people. As you drift off to sleep, let the roaring spirit of Churchill remind you that even amidst the rubble, hope and humor can resonate louder than any bomb blast. Because, dear friend, when history gets grim, laughter might just be your best ally. After all, bad times can't last forever. Unless, of course, you're trying to assemble that IKEA furniture. Sleep tight. Chapter 12. Winston Churchill, the Bulldog Roar. Hey guys, you've arrived at a moment in history that's tougher than your last gym membership, the World War II era. Picture it, a time when blimps were not just a thing you did to a balloon, but actual military vehicles, and sock shortages were somehow more devastating than a bad breakup. Remember the last time you tried to reason with a stubborn cab driver who insisted he knew a shortcut, but ended up taking you on a scenic route through the suburbs? Now, amplify that feeling of frustration by about 1,000. Mix in some bomb explosions, and you're in for a thrilling ride of absurdity. Before we plunge into this wild adventure, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you actually enjoy this, of course. No pressure. Now, dim the lights, put on your favorite fan, and get cozy as we traverse back to the 1940s, where every day was a gritty, grey movie, featuring not-so-silent bombers more determined than your cat trying to steal your seat. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to stand with a cigar in your mouth as the world crumbles around you? Or how about dealing with such outrageous tension that your jaw could probably sever a cheeseburger in half? Do you think people back then complained about Wi-Fi and cell service drops when they saw their homes flattened, or wondered if Churchill ever had a dull day, musing about what to have for lunch while standing amidst rubble? Spoiler alert, lunch was likely less of a thought and more of a wishful dream. Congratulations! You've just woken up in London, 1940, and it's about as grim as it gets. You can almost taste the smoke lingering in the air, a blend of burnt toast and unresolved tension. As you shake off the cobwebs from your brain, your eyes adjust to the sight of Winston Churchill, the ultimate bulldog of English grit, standing defiantly before you. Now, visualize Churchill. He's looking like a granite gargoyle dressed in a suit that's seen more action than an over-eager plumber on a holiday weekend. Picture him, cigar clenched between his teeth like a determined bulldog, ready to face the postal carrier. Except in this context, the postal carrier is a whole battalion of warplanes. Trust me, no one ever said war would look good in a knitted sweater. The sounds around you are louder than a marching band on double espresso. The rhythmic thump of boots, stray dog barks, and the distant roar of blitzkrieg reverberating through the very air you breathe. You step outside and the streets are a treacherous jigsaw of bombed buildings and debris, adorned with craters that look like Mother Nature's most unflattering approach to modern art. Quite the charming place, eh? You hear someone murmur to another. You realize they're taking cover, their teeth chattering even louder than they chatter. The smell of urgency hangs thickly in the air, mingled with something you can only describe as post-explosion chic. It's a trend that definitely hasn't caught on, thank goodness. As you watch Churchill, it becomes clear that this man has the resolve of someone trying to coax a cat out from under a bed. You can almost imagine him shaking a fist at the sky, demanding both respect from the enemy and a decent cup of tea. "We shall never surrender," echoes his gravelly voice, and you think, you tell them, buddy. Never mind that your own nerves are dancing like a startled rabbit in a room full of rocking chairs. But let us pause for a moment to discuss the attire of the day. Suits that seemed more suitable for a funeral than a battlefield, complemented by hats that looked like they had their own postal routes. How did anyone take anything seriously when they were dressed like they just stepped out of a discount haberdashery? And food, the rations! Imagine you're craving a 5-star Michelin meal and instead being served mystery stew that could win awards for both texture and ambiguity. You wonder if they turned the leftovers from last week's dinner into a special kind of soup called Desperate Times that, if you squinted hard enough, You could almost blend into a comforting bowl of nostalgia, or at least that's what your mind is trying to convince you, while simultaneously processing the realities of having to choose between a potato or a tin of sardines. Churchill, though, you have to admire the man's ingenuity. He navigated the challenges of wartime Britain with the charm of a bulldog and resolve perhaps only matched by an unusually stubborn toddler refusing to share a toy. As he takes a drag from his cigar, you can almost see the gears turning in his mind. What's next? How do we keep hope alive amidst the barrage of chaos? It's undoubtedly a mental puzzle, perhaps even more complex than attempting to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. "Let's rally the troops," he declares, and your heart swells with pride and, let's be real, a touch of absurdity. You can't help but picture him bursting into spontaneous song about making a great deal out of tomatoes while airborne, with the sheer determination to keep spirits high through the high-rise rubble of his city. Even amidst the direst of circumstances, there's a bizarre camaraderie that lives within these walls. Amid sirens and shouts, people are gathered, clothes singed, and faces smeared with soot. But laughter, yes, they dare to laugh, a light in the shadows. It's almost like standing in the middle of a comedy club, where the punchlines are casualties of war, both hilarious and tragic, and reality anchors itself deeply into the hearts of the people. As you drift off to sleep, let the roaring spirit of Churchill remind you that even amidst the rubble, hope and humor can resonate louder than any bomb blast. Because, dear friend, when history gets grim, laughter might just be your best ally. After all, bad times can't last forever. Unless, of course, you're trying to assemble that IKEA furniture. Sleep tight.
Chapter 13. The Fall of Paris, 1940. Hey guys, welcome back to that era when the tea was strong, the decisions were questionable, and the stakes were higher than a cat on a caffeine high. Yes, it's World War II, and things are about to get interesting. Tonight, we delve into a moment in history smoother than your favorite late-night jazz playlist, and yet as fraught as your last attempt at home repairs. Imagine yourself strolling the beautiful boulevards of Paris. Sounds enchanting, right? But that serene daydream is about to flip like a pancake on a roller coaster as we take a deep dive into the fall of this iconic city. A time when German troops marched in perfect formation past monuments that once radiated beauty, but now stood eerily silent, like your phone when you drop it in the toilet momentarily. Before we take our stylish tour down the Champs-Élysées, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you genuinely enjoy this content, of course. No pressure. We're not barrage bombing your inbox with notifications. Yet. Now, dim those lights, fluff your pillows, and let's begin our gentle stroll through a historical mess that even the best French maitre d' couldn't salvage. Ever wondered what it would have been like to stand there sipping your café au lait while a battalion of German soldiers marched past you? Did people back then think, wow, my croissant is tastier than the view from my window? Or did they simply panic, running around like headless chickens juggling baguettes? What if someone asked, who's winning the war? And you just answered, have you seen the weather today? Because honestly, it was all anyone could talk about. Picture yourself waking up in Paris on June 14th, 1940. The air is thick with a blend of anxiety, smoke, and what can only be described as unresolved tension, the kind that looms like that final exam you didn't study for. You blink your eyes open, and voila, Paris isn't just the city of love anymore. It's a place where the national monuments are in such a state of despair, they look like they just found out their favorite band broke up. As you step outside, the silence feels less serene and more like the ominous pause before a bad punchline. The sidewalks that once held laughter
are now being trampled by boots marching with a precision that would give any choreographed dance routine a run for its money. You can hear the rhythm of those boots faster than your heart when you see your ex at a party you didn't want to attend. Ah, the sight of German troops marching silently, well-formed, past the dark, deserted streets is like witnessing a slow-motion train wreck, almost mesmerizing, yet undeniably terrifying. You can't help but think, are they all practicing for so you think you can march? Meanwhile, the Eiffel Tower looms regally in the background, probably just wishing it could cloak itself in the clouds like some dramatic diva wishing for a fifth encore. Now let's pause to discuss the smell. It's a curious blend, kind of like burnt popcorn at a kid's soccer game, mixed with a hefty dose of burnt anxiety. You can practically taste the irony in the air. This was, after all, the city of artists and dreamers. Only now they were being forced to redesign their lives quicker than a fashion model can change outfits. As the troops continue their march, you notice the remnants of what once were bustling cafes, now mere shells where laughter used to echo. Was the cappuccino to blame for this madness? Had someone spilled their espresso on a map and accidentally declared war? It's that sort of historical question that makes you want to giggle uneasily, pondering over croissants while slightly regretting your second helping. You also can't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. Men outfitted in uniforms that seem tailor-made to match Hitler's misguided aspirations. Picture them exuding confidence, as if they were off to audition for a musical theater production titled How to Ruin a City with Style. Because strolling through Paris in perfectly pressed uniforms, while chaos looms around, is indeed a skill set. The people of Paris, on the other hand, are doing their best to maintain some semblance of dignity. Picture a group of Parisians attempting to continue with their lives, navigating around soldiers like they're just another street performer juggler outside Sacré-Cœur. Always beret-capped, they endeavor to sip their wine with nonchalance, pretending the world isn't literally crumbling around them. You have to admire their commitment to the keep calm and carry on mantra. It's almost poetic, if, poetry included awkward waltzing in the streets. But soon enough the tension thickens like gravy left on the stove too long. You can feel the uncertainty crawling under your skin, like trying to wear that embarrassing pair of socks your grandma knit for you. The streets may be deserted, but oh, the echoes of defiance swirl around. Will they surrender? Will hope prevail? Or will everyone be trading their fancy pastries for overdue reality checks? As you breathe in the strange mix of panic and hope, you hear whispers of resistance in the air, like a bad sitcom punchline just waiting to drop. And while the march continues, stealing the laughter roar from the city that once lived in unwavering joy, those whispers serve as a reminder that even amid disaster, humor crawls out of the rubble, if you know where to look for it. So as you settle in for the night, let the absurdity of history remind you. Even the most dire circumstances can be tinged with irony and humor. Because sometimes, in the face of impending doom, the best we can do is to let out a gentle chuckle at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. And who knows? Even now, somewhere in Paris,
Perhaps a cat is plotting its own revolution over fallen croissants. Sleep tight. Chapter 14. The Battle of Britain. Hey guys, welcome back to a time when the skies were as turbulent as your last trip through airport security. The Battle of Britain, where pilots were younger than your average office intern, exhausted but bravely hopping into their planes like they were jumping on a crowded subway. Tonight, we're soaring through the clouds over the English countryside, where dogfights are hotter than that last chili you dared to eat after midnight, and where peace was as elusive as your Wi-Fi signal during a storm. Before we begin this thrilling voyage with a side of absurdity, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you truly enjoy this kind of whimsical history ride, of course. No pressure. We're not here to bombard you like a surprise fire drill during your lunch hour. Now, dim those lights, set that fan to cool breeze, and get cozy. Now let me ask you, have you ever tried strapping yourself into a tight space while wearing a heavy helmet, knowing that your only mode of transport is an overgrown metallic bug with wings? Or perhaps you've wondered what it feels like to battle modern-day traffic, yet know that you could be shot at any moment. Sounds fun, right? It's like trying to park at Costco, but with slightly more urgency. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the early days of World War II, and it's time for your first lesson in exhilaration, British style. The sun is rising over the lush green hills of England, but don't let that fool you. Up above, the skies are about to become a carnival of chaos and bravery, where every pilot is putting their best foot forward, literally and figuratively. As you step out, the air is thick with the scent of engine oil, burnt rubber, and a hint of stressed-out bravery. You can hear the faint hum of aircraft engines above, buzzing like a swarm of slightly irate bees with a vendetta. Why is it that something so beautiful can also be so terrifying? You find yourself squinting up at the sky, half expecting to see a Spitfire doing loop-de-loops with the elegance of a drunken ballet dancer. Now, picture our brave pilots. Let's say they're in their late teens or early 20s. Somewhere between buying their first pint and figuring out exactly what proper tea means. They scramble to their aircraft like they're late for a first date, fumbling with flight charts as if they were maps to the nearest pub. The pre-flight checks are less about checklist efficiency and more about whether they remembered to bring a lucky charm. You know, like Grandma's old lucky coin, or anything else that wouldn't save them if a German bomber showed up suddenly. Every pilot, decked out in their khaki flying suits, looks for all the world like they've raided a thrift store specializing in military surplus. They rise and fall with the rhythms of adrenaline as they tiptoe around propellers that are spinning faster than a cat at a dog show. It's a scene that's ridiculous, tragic, and kind of heartwarming all at once. Who knew that one day you'd find yourself living in a real-life air combat thriller? As the call to arms echoes, the young pilot's camaraderie resembles that of a college dorm room that's somehow turned into a makeshift war room. They chatter nervously, sharing exaggerated stories of daring rescues and mismanaged landings, all while someone behind them is belly-aching about lost breakfast bacon. It's just like any group of friends, except these guys are preparing to nosedive into enemy territory. Talk about a rough morning commute. And then you hear it, the sound of engines roaring to life, becoming a glorious orchestra of chaos. The skies above transform into a battleground where British ingenuity and German aerial tactics clash like poorly synchronized dancers at a wedding. The fighter planes zoom past, their silhouettes framed against the almost serene English landscape. It's as if nature is oblivious to the drama unfolding above, as it continues to bloom like it hasn't got a care in the world. You know, like that one friend who always manages to show up to the party, blissfully unaware of the drama. But here's the kicker. These pilots aren't just fighting for air superiority. They're fighting for tea. Yes, dear friends, tea, a national treasure, and just as precious as any life they hope to protect. The very idea of the British losing their cherished afternoon tea was a dire thought, much like the existential crisis you feel when you find there's no coffee left in the pot on a Monday morning. As you take in this surprising combination of vivid imagery and frantic energy, the dogfights above become almost like a surreal art piece. You can picture the Spitfires twisting, turning, and performing ballet-like maneuvers to avoid the relentless Luftwaffe attacks. This is not just flying, it's an aerial dance-off, where every maneuver has the potential to make history, or at least a really dramatic TikTok video. Now, let's pause for a second to consider the absurdity. Is it possible that these pilots were just high school kids looking to impress their crushes? Oh, look at Jimmy. He can do a barrel roll. What can you do, Kyle? And yet, despite the craziness of it all, these young men are standing tall, fueled by youthful bravado, unmitigated courage, and perhaps one too many cups of tea just before combat. As you settle deeper into this contemplation, remember that each pilot's story is one of grit and determination, filled with moments that may just bring a wry smile to your face, despite the tension in the air. It's a world where humor mingles with heroism, reminding us all that even in the midst of global turmoil, laughter might just be the best weapon of all. So, as the engines fade into the night and dreams of aerial dogfights take hold, remember this: the outcome of wars might shape the world, but it's the absurdity of human spirit in times of chaos that makes it truly memorable. Here's to the brave few, soaring through their challenges, one tea-fueled flight at a time. Sleep well. Chapter 15. Operation Barbarossa. Sunrise Invasion. Hey guys, welcome back to the most unwelcome wake-up call since your last alarm clock malfunctioned, which, let's be honest, is about as appealing as finding a moth in your favorite cereal. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into a less than sunny morning on June 22nd, 1941. A very special day when the Germans decided that a little housewarming gift of tanks and soldiers would be just the thing for their new neighbors, the Soviets. Yes, it's the grand debut of Operation Barbarossa, where military strategies were akin to an overambitious toddler wielding crayons. It was colorful and wildly unplanned. But before we leap into the chunky goodness of this historical casserole, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment. Only if you genuinely enjoy this chaotic romp through history. We're not aiming for a mass invasion here, just a few good vibes like a gentle summer breeze. So, dim those lights, perhaps turn on your fan like you're prepping for a stylish 1940s dance, and get ready to cozy up. Now, let's ponder a few questions together. Have you ever tried to organize a game of charades, only to find yourself unexpectedly inundated by enthusiastic participants who can't agree on the rules? Or perhaps you recall those moments when everyone shows up to a picnic with the same potato salad, leaving you to wonder if it was secretly a conspiracy. Imagine that chaos multiplied by 1,000,
and instead of potato salad, you've got tanks rolling through your backyard. Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1941, and guess what? Today is the day when Germany decides that they want not just a backyard barbecue, but the entire Soviet Union's backyard. The sun is just peeking over the horizon as three massive German army groups, sleek and shiny like overzealous cars at a dealership, are preparing to roar into action. It's like watching a parade, but instead of floats, wielders of weapons march forward with more enthusiasm than a child at a candy shop during Halloween. As the first rays of sun dance across the horizon, you can almost hear the collective "oh wow" of Soviet soldiers realizing they might be in for a rather rude surprise. The air is thick with tension, anticipation, and the unmistakable scent of very poor life choices on the German side. All around you, the landscape is a mix of lush green fields, soon to become a playground for armored vehicles and a canvas for more chaos than a TikTok dance challenge gone wrong. You begin to hear the low growl of engines that would make your average neighbor's loud lawnmower seem like a mere whisper. Tanks patrol like wobbly hippos on steroids, creating an earth-shattering rumble that shakes the ground as if Mother Nature herself has decided to join the action. Can you imagine trying to enjoy your morning coffee while everything shakes like maracas at a jazz concert? Not very zen. One can't help but think of the poor soldiers on both sides, thrust into this mind-boggling spectacle. Just yesterday they might have been cozily debating the philosophical aspect of hats, or cooling their heels, dreaming of swimming in vague promises of peace. Instead, they are now facing a reality that's a far cry from their local bar's trivia night. Do you think I'll remember how to survive a surprise invasion? Is probably not going to be the answer when you ask, what's the capital of Poland? As explosions light up the sky like fireworks gone horribly wrong, soldiers scramble to their positions with a mix of confusion and bravado that suggests they might have just accidentally wandered straight from the soccer pitch into a battle zone. Nobody really prepared them for this, did they? With the coordination of a cat walking on a keyboard, the German army's three-pronged assault moves forward with an energy reminiscent of a kid sprinting to the front of the line for an ice cream truck. Maybe they thought it would be a lot more fun than history had planned. Meanwhile, the Soviet defenders, who were likely engaged in intense strategizing only moments before, perhaps over an unholy amount of borscht, now find themselves zipping up their jackets and fumbling for their loaded rifles. It's a classic case of so much for that plan. If your heart wasn't racing before, it certainly would be now, as you realize that your sweater is being drafted for service under the most absurd of circumstances. And let's not forget the logistical challenges. Imagine trying to arrange snacks for a picnic when all you really have are the ingredients for failed recipes. Well, the Germans thought they incredibly mastered logistics when they decided to invade a country larger than their own refrigerator, loaded with soldiers ready to party. They hadn't quite accounted for the vastness of the Soviet territory, reminiscent of planning a weekend retreat but instead plunging headfirst into a never-ending family reunion on a mega scale. History has a funny way of reminding us that things rarely go according to plan. And as the tanks and soldiers reel through the fields and forests of the Soviet Union, you'd almost think they're recreating a slightly dysfunctional yet epic road trip, filled with missed exits and unexpected roadside attractions. Though this trip might end up with a few more casualties than anyone would have liked to imagine. So, as you lay back with vivid images of German tanks rolling through the fields on their wild, unplanned escapade, remember that history isn't just a series of dates and battles. It's an elaborate tapestry of human folly and resilience, where absurdity reigns supreme. And while some may choose to look at wars as grim occurrences, perhaps we can remind ourselves that amidst the cacophony of history, even in the gravest moments, there lies a spark of ridiculousness waiting to be uncovered. Sleep well, dear. Historian in the making. May your dreams be infused with a dash of adventure and laughter, and an understanding that sometimes chaos isn't so chaotic after all.
Chapter 16. When the Sky Rained Steel.
Hey guys, imagine waking up one day and realizing that instead of your usual routine of coffee and scrolling through Instagram, you're facing a sky full of planes, like they're parachuting in your terrible neighbor's new lawn decor. Tonight, we take a trip to December 7th, 1941, a day which will go down in infamy. Kind of like that time you accidentally sent your boss a meme instead of a work email. Get ready for a wild immersion into the morning when Pearl Harbor became the most unexpected stage for an aviation show, complete with kamikaze clowns raining down explosive birthday surprises on the U.S. Pacific Fleet. But before we dive into this historical soap opera, take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment, though only if you actually enjoy this comedic chaos unfolding through the ages. The last thing we want is a digital invasion of our humble historical hearts. So, dim those lights, maybe put on a fan, like you're prepping for the fanciest 1940s soiree, and get ready to settle in as we whisk you back to a time of big hair, even bigger ambitions, and the kind of tension that makes your last family dinner look like a picnic in the park. Now, let's ponder a few questions together. Have you ever tried to organize a surprise party, only to have the guest of honor find out well in advance? Or perhaps you've experienced that hazy moment when the growing disaster of plans turns out to be an epic fail. Imagine that moment multiplied tenfold, with stakes that are higher than your cousin Larry's repeated New Year's resolutions. Welcome to the world of 1941, where every moment has the potential for pure chaos, especially when you're utterly and unfailingly unprepared for multiple Japanese planes buzzing overhead, like a swarm of angry hornets crashing the neighborhood picnic. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the sleepy paradise of Oahu, Hawaii, but it's not exactly the cozy beach vacation you imagined. As you timidly peek outside, you realize it's not raindrops you're hearing, but rather engines roaring above like an orchestra's worst nightmare. Close, out of tune, and making a scene. Yes, It's Pearl Harbor, and those planes are not leading a friendly aerial parade. They're here for an impromptu surprise attack. It's a breezy Sunday morning, but before you can even consider a second cup of coffee, your peaceful blue sky becomes a canvas for chaos. As you rub your eyes sleepily, in swoops the first wave of 350 planes, like overzealous pigeons discovering an all-you-can-eat buffet at the park. You're not just waking up to scrambled eggs. You're facing a breakfast of bombshells, served with uninvited explosions. Let's talk about what this means for you, the hapless soul in the middle of the upheaval. It's a bit like attempting to engage in morning yoga while a tornado whips around you. Inhale, count to 3. Oh wait, there goes my neighbor's car. In the middle of breakfast preparations, you're grappling with the odd realization that your entire Sunday routine has morphed into an adrenaline-pumped disaster movie, complete with popcorn explosions and the very real chance of disaster. Between the screams and the plummeting aircraft, it's tempting to think you might have overcooked that croissant just a tad. Now, if you've ever experienced that feeling when you find a hole in your favorite shirt and wonder if anyone will notice at the gathering, imagine that on a whole new level. Only now that hole is your entire spiritual center, screaming for help. As a looming shadow darkens your breakfast nook, you can't help but think, next time I'll definitely make toast instead. Because there's nothing like a surprise aerial assault to truly put a damper on your morning. As the bombs fall and the torpedoes splash into the water, you gaze out at the harbor where your ships, perhaps the pride and joy of the fleet, are being treated to the most explosive wake-up call imaginable. It's the kind of moment where even the bravest sailors find themselves frantically swabbing the decks, trying to navigate between explosions like a real-life game of dodgeball, except the stakes are just a little higher than your average gym class. And while chaos unfurls across the military base, whichever unfortunate soul had the whole "let's do active drills on a Sunday" idea is now standing by, wishing they could take a well-deserved, "ooh, never mind" vacation. Imagine someone saying, "Good news! Remember how we planned to relax today?" Followed by a calamitous reminder that your day just turned into an adrenaline-pumping horror story. Ouch. With every boom and explosion, the air fills with acrid smoke that curls like the worst cologne you've ever encountered. You can practically taste history, the unfiltered chaos mixed dramatically with a pinch of thick black fear. And you start to realize that maybe today wasn't going to turn out quite as peacefully as you had hoped. Who knew that "stay calm and carry on" had an asterisk next to it for massive aerial bombardments? As you lay back against the rubble of yesterday's plans and begin drifting off into a chaotic stupor of half-hearted rebellion and sheer disbelief, remember that even amidst the most turbulent of moments, there's a comedic flair that history provides. And while today might be a rough ride, there's something to be said about the resilience of the human spirit, even when it's trying to sleep through a bombardment. So sleep well, dear history buff. It's not every day you find yourself at the intersection of absurdity and turmoil. May your dreams be as riveting as the tales of those who wake up to a world on fire, and may they come with a good sprinkling of laughs and a nap that stretches deep into the night. Chapter 17. Stalingrad. Descent into Hell. Hey guys, imagine waking up in a frozen playground, but instead of swings and slides, you have twisted metal and ruined buildings. Welcome to Stalingrad in the winter of 1942.
A time when the only warmth came from the fires of war, not your coffee mug. Tonight, we'll traverse an urban battlefield that makes your high school gym class look like a friendly game of charades. But before we plunge into this icy nightmare, why not give a little thumbs up to the warmth that is your screen, and subscribe if you find yourself chuckling amidst the chaos. And let's be honest, only do that if you actually enjoy this historical romp. We wouldn't want to bring in any unwanted digital snowstorms. So, dim the lights, grab a cozy blanket, or a wall of rubble if you're feeling particularly in tune with the theme, and settle in as we dive into a world where every corner could hide either an enemy or an unsuspecting delivery boy with extremely poor timing. I want you to ponder a few peculiar questions. Have you ever found yourself negotiating peace with a roommate only to realize it has the same chance of success as a snowball in a volcano? Or maybe you've tried dodging a toddler's tantrum only to have it escalate like a scene out of a world-ending blockbuster. Picture that dilemma, but with tanks instead of toys. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Stalingrad, February 1943. The air is crisp, a delightful minus 30 degrees Celsius, just perfect for a jaunt through the ruined remains of what was once a bustling city. But hold on to your hats, because instead of a light snow, you'll encounter something far more explosive: house-to-house combat, where friendly fire is as common as an unexpected cat on a Zoom call. Let's talk about what your morning looks like in this concrete jungle. The sun barely breaks through steel-gray clouds, casting a dim light over the rubble-strewn streets, where the soundscape is a delightful blend of gunfire and the occasional whimper of a beleaguered soldier, like a very twisted and continuously failing morning alarm clock. You wake up, not to your soothing playlist of lo-fi beats, but rather the rattle and clatter that feels less like an alarm and more like an aggressive drum solo played by a blindfolded percussionist during a thunderstorm. Ah, yes, the aroma of your morning coffee? Sorry, that's out of season in Stalingrad, with rationing in full swing. Instead, you might catch a whiff of burnt rations and the lingering scent of frozen desperation. It's like a five-star dining experience, if the stars were made of broken bricks and bitterness thick enough to spread on a piece of stale bread. Now, as you step outside, brace yourself for the chilly embrace of reality, which is far more constricting than that space heater you thought would save you from the cold draft of your own home. Imagine skirting around shattered glass and bent metal instead of your lovely, cushy carpet. It's as if someone transformed your favorite cafe into a post-apocalyptic horror film, putting you at the heart of a split-second choice: coffee to warm your insides, or dodging sniper fire to get to the next shelter. Speaking of shelters, homes in Stalingrad are less cozy nooks and more adventure zones. Imagine a family living room, once full of lively chatter and the laughing echoes of children, now reduced to a maze of crumbling walls, several suspiciously frozen rats, and a lingering doubt about who may step on a landmine first. It's like Survivor, but without the luxury of immunity idols or a decent buffet. The scenes of urban combat feel like an absurdly tense game of hide-and-seek, where instead of counting to 10, you're praying someone doesn't find you at all, because finding you often leads to a face-off with the terrifyingly active spirit of a raging winter war. The neighbors aren't all that friendly either, and chances are they might just be after your last can of beans. So, what's the plan for today? You're navigating a never-ending grid of craters, much like trying to find a parking space at a popular shopping mall during the holidays. One wrong move, and you could find yourself out in the open, or regretting every bad decision that led you to this morning. Think about it. Is there a warmer spot back in your makeshift bomb shelter? Or should you risk an up-close and personal escapade with a tank that looks strategically placed to ruin your mood? And while you barely make it one street down, you might wonder if your morning commute has ever felt quite so perilous. Every nook carries the potential for chaos, a sniper's bullet, an erupting shell, or a mischievous pigeon with a grudge against humanity. As the day lingers on, you tell yourself that maybe lunch will bring some solace. If you're lucky enough to find rations, they might taste like victory, or perhaps despair in paste form. Bon appetit, you muse quietly, knowing full well that a little imagination is the key to digesting the day's offerings. Finally, as dusk falls, and the last vestiges of warmth seep from every crevice, it dawns on you that tomorrow's adventures will likely involve another round of urban hunting, a game you never signed up for, but are now alarmingly good at. So, sleep well, dear historian, and imagine a world where the chaos of war meets the absurdity of human spirit. Lay your head down, and may your dreams be filled with a comedy troupe of soldiers attempting to navigate the blunders of warfare, all while you rest safely beneath layers of quilts and a good book.
Chapter 18. The Tanks of El Alamein. Hey guys, imagine waking up in a sun-baked oven that accidentally turned itself to the highest setting while you were out shopping for a decent pair of sandals. Are you feeling the heat? Welcome to North Africa in World War II, where the sun is unyielding and the sand does its best impersonation of 1,000,000 tiny daggers. Tonight, we're going to venture into the El Alamein Desert, a place where German General Erwin Rommel, known affectionately as the Desert Fox, found himself in quite a tangle while facing off against the robust British General Montgomery and his impressive line of tanks. But first, why not give a little thumbs up to the comforting glow of your screen and subscribe if you find yourself chuckling amidst the chaos? But hey, only do that if you actually like it. We wouldn't want to attract any unwanted sandstorms, or worse, a horde of angry camels. So, let's get comfy. Dim the lights, crank up that desk fan to "I need my sandwich to stay still" mode, and grab a cozy blanket, or, if you're feeling particularly adventurous, a sack of flour and a curious cat. As we set off on this historical journey, I want you to ponder a few whimsical questions. Have you ever tried playing a game of poker while being pelted with water balloons, only to realize your dear friends have come to collect on all those favors from your last barbecue? Or maybe you've haggled over the last avocado at the farmer's market, and it turned into a lively debate worthy of a courtroom drama, complete with gesticulations and exaggerated facial expressions. Imagine that, but with an army of tanks rumbling forward, and you're trying to negotiate peace in the middle of a catastrophic bake-off. Congratulations! You've just woken up in October 1942, standing in the El Alamein Desert. The sun is blazing. The sand is hotter than your uncle's hot sauce recipe, and let's just say that if you haven't packed sunscreen, you might as well consider yourself a historical leather handbag. As you attempt to gather your bearings, you can feel the heat mirroring the frantic energy of the battlefield nearby. Monty's tanks advance like an uninvited dinner guest, steadily rolling out across the dusty plains, while Rommel, with his equally impressive style, struggles to hold back the tide. Ah, the sweet aroma of asphalt melting underfoot, and the distant rattle of machinery. You'd think this was merely the soundtrack for a bad road trip, but alas, it's World War II. Step carefully. As you now maneuver through this chaos, the ground beneath you is packed with a crusty substance that you can convince yourself is entirely composed of gravel. Closer inspection reveals it's more of a charming blend of dust, remains of military rations, and what appears to be the odd lost sandal. The desert floor is more unforgiving than a nosy neighbor, determined to find a reason to complain about the noise from your garden party. Now, as if you're landing a hefty stew of bizarre, let's talk about combat essentials. Got your sunscreen? Good for you. But you'll soon learn that nothing can protect you from the sound of tanks rumbling forward. It's like trying to tune out the sound of a toddler's tantrum at a grocery store. Futile, exhausting, and slightly maddening. The rattling and clanking serve as a dreadful reminder that any attempt at peace here is positively wishful thinking. Peering into the distance, you can see a line of tanks, glistening like meticulously polished plates, an oddly charming sight amidst the pervasive chaos. Montgomery has crafted them into a fearsome phalanx, each one an impenetrable fortress on tracks. Your mind boggles of their layout, which feels more like a toddler's toy collection than a mechanized strike force. "Hey, look!" you're inclined to shout to your new comrades in arms. Is anyone else reminded of those ridiculous inflatable pool toys we all crammed into our cars once upon a time? You might find that the soldiers around you aren't as amused, primarily due to the chance that their sense of humor has been scorched off like hair exposed to a rogue flame. Yet, the absurdity of the scene holds a certain laughable charm. Imagine a troop of seasoned generals arguing over territory while deciding who gets dibs on the last can of beans. As dusk falls over the arid expanse, the horizon bathes the landscape in hues of burnt orange and dusty pink. You spot Rommel's Africa Corps retreating, their tanks lumbering backward like a line of overzealous dancers, trying to keep in time with an offbeat drum. One wonders if Rommel had a secret weapon, an innate ability to sense the moment when enemy tanks inevitably look like they're having existential crises about the merits of rolling forward. And while the tension hangs in the air like stale chips at a family gathering, consider the absurdity of it all. Just as you've got the artistry of historical drama unfolding, somewhere else, people are having existential crises about Wi-Fi connection issues. Proof that even in war, the human experience transcends time. So as you slip into a peaceful slumber, we gently embrace the chaos of history. May your dreams be filled with the memory of a desert landscape, where tanks, miscommunication, and existential crises dance hand in hand. Who knows? Maybe in your dreams, you'll join a team of spirited historians, racing through the sands with hastily scribbled maps and a questionable supply of sandwiches. Sleep tight, brave historical traveler, and let the night carry you away into laughter, absurdity, and history's delightful twists. Chapter 19. The Carrier's Fiasco. Hey guys, imagine waking up and realizing your alarm clock has been replaced by a dozen squawking seagulls, all determined to get you out of bed and straight into a delightful bowl of panic. Welcome to the vast, shimmering blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean in 1942.
where the sun blazes hotter than your Aunt Mildred's famous casserole during Thanksgiving. Buckle up, because tonight we're diving into a wild tale of military blunders that'll make your worst day at the office feel like a walk on the beach, complete with seashells and soothing surf sounds. But before we take a dive like a confused dolphin, how about giving that like button a gentle tap? And if you find yourself chuckling amidst this watery chaos, subscribe, only if you actually want to, of course. We wouldn't want to upset the balance of the ocean, or worse, get splashed by a rogue wave of bad karma. All right, let's get comfy. Dim the lights. Put on your favorite ocean-scented fan, a lovely alternative to a real sea breeze, and settle into your cozy blanket. Or if you're feeling particularly adventurous, grab a fresh pair of socks, some laundry that needs folding, and a good book. Take a moment to ponder these whimsical questions. Have you ever tried to find your sunglasses while simultaneously wrestling an octopus that has mistaken you for a human buffet? Or perhaps you've accidentally created so much confusion at the grocery store that the folks at self-checkout started an impromptu support group? Imagine that, but being out at sea, where, instead of confused shoppers, you're surrounded by a fleet of aircraft carriers, executing a comprehensive plan that's, well, largely nonsensical. Congratulations! You've just woken up in June 1942, right in the middle of the Pacific theater of World War II, where everything's a little blurry, and not just because you left your glasses in the submarine. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, appearing calm and inviting, even if, just below the surface, one could argue this blue mass is simply simmering with angry fish and torpedo-shaped frustration. Now, let's talk about strategy. Picture yourself one of the many clever minds at the helm of the American naval fleet, preparing to execute the most extraordinary ambush on the unsuspecting Imperial Japanese forces. You'd think this was a meticulously plotted heist drama, where everyone has a role and the coffee is always fresh. But no, this was more like a home improvement reality show gone wrong. Maybe just a touch less reality and a tad more sitcom-style absurdity. As the wind gently stirs the waves, you can hear the familiar sound of a naval fleet gearing up like an over-caffeinated marching band. Clanging metal, muffled shouts, and the occasional, "Hey, watch where you're stepping," echoing across the deck. The scent of salt water blankets the ship, combined with the unmistakable odor of 100 poorly cooked breakfast burritos left unattended in the galley. It's practically a culinary hazard, possibly even a war crime, depending on who you ask. And oh, the irony. Just as you think things can't get any more absurd, news reaches you that Japanese aircraft carriers, slick as a greased eel, are on their way for a little party of their own, set to enjoy an evening of attack like it's a poorly planned surprise birthday bash. Only in this case, the enormous cake has been replaced by a massive armada of ships, armed to the teeth with aircraft, and the U.S. Navy has inadvertently RSVP'd yes to this rather ominous affair. Yes, those 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, are out and about, showcasing the type of naval prowess typically seen only in overly ambitious fitness plans. You might as well have been out on the water with an inflatable flamingo, trying to wage war against them with nothing but a squirt gun. Spoiler, that didn't end well. As the Pacific sun starts to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, a different kind of tension fills the air.
Anomalies unfold like a man trying on pants one size too small. It's both fascinating and uncomfortable to witness. Your hearts race, resembling an awkward game of musical chairs, with more stakes and less polite family reunion chatter. The moment has come, an explosion of flight as the dive bombers, soaring above with dizzying swiftness, descend like comical birds, intent on delivering takeaway sushi orders. Which way did they go, you might ask, your eyes darting nervously. But these aircraft are maneuvering with the grace of a cow on roller skates amidst treacherously windy conditions, filled with hints of miscommunication and spectacular accidents. You'd think they were participating in some bizarre ballet, one that required mid-air acrobatics and more than a sprinkle of luck. And as smoke plumes billow up into the sky like a persistent chef trying to start a fire in a fireproof pan, the realization hits. This isn't simply an encounter. The U.S. Navy has pulled off a surprise attack that will devastate its opponents. 4 massive aircraft carriers are now inexplicably turning into floating wrecks, disappearing beneath the surface of the water as if they've slipped on a banana peel. Just imagine the startled fish scattering around them. What just happened? They seem to bubble in confusion. In the chaotic aftermath, many will say that Midway marks the turning point of the war. Others will argue it's just another quirky chapter engraved in the annals of history, the one where the carriers went down faster than a bad sitcom cancellation notice. But let's not be over-dramatic. History, after all, is just one big comedy club where everyone gets hired one way or another. Sadly, the punchline here left a few career naval officers in a rather awkward position. So as the waves wash over these once grand vessels,
Think not of loss, but of the wonderful absurdities woven throughout history. May your dreams be laced with visions of determined carriers not making it to their next engagement, gracefully admiring colorful sunsets while pondering what's next on the menu. Sleep tight, dear navigator, and let the tales of the sea carry you away to sweet dreaming shores.
Chapter 20. The Wading Warriors of Omaha Beach.
Hey guys, have you ever tried wading through a pool of Jell-O while wearing a pair of cement shoes? Probably not, unless you happen to be a novice contestant on a bizarre game show. But that's about as close as you can get to the experience we're diving into tonight. Picture this. The sun is shining brighter than a toddler on a sugar high, and all you want is to settle in for a lovely day at the beach. But instead, you find yourself dodging machine gun fire like it's a family gathering where Uncle Larry attempts to give the same toast for the 3rd time. Welcome to Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944, where your beach day is less about sunbathing and more about, well, sheer survival against a backdrop of chaos. But before we go rushing in like a seagull after a hot dog, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this historical roller coaster of absurdity, give that like button a gentle nudge. And if you're really into this, why not subscribe? It could be a fun way to impress your friends. Oh, you've been learning about the D-Day invasion? Well, I'm on the email list of a wonderfully quirky history channel. And don't be shy. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear about your wildest beach nightmare, filled with confused jellyfish or overcooked barbecue. All right, let's set the mood. Dim those lights, switch on a fan, or if you prefer, go wild and bring out an old toaster for that retro ambient effect. Snuggle up with your favorite blanket, and for an added dose of comfort, consider wearing a pair of socks you haven't washed since the 90s. Let's drift into those whimsical thoughts. Have you ever wondered what it's like to wade through water while simultaneously dodging angry crabs that are more determined than your latest gym buddy? Ever tried to convince your significant other that yes, corralling a flock of geese sounds like a fun afternoon? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up on the morning of June 6th, 1944. And as the loud clang of war whispers sweet nothings around your ears, you find yourself in the middle of an event that would change the course of history, and possibly your footwear choices forever. Now, let's talk about the beach. But not just any beach. Omaha Beach, where the sand isn't made of sparkling white granules, but rather the fine blend of grit, fear, and a few forgotten sandwiches lost to time. Imagine preparing to wade into water that resembles a monstrous washing machine filled with chaos, anger, and about 1,000 perfectly timed alarms. Yep, that's Omaha for you. As you pull on your military-issued boots, you feel like a contestant on a truly unfortunate reality show. You might as well be saying, "Today I'll drown. Impress the judges with my stunning courage and skillful dodging." You can hear the thrum of excitement and occasional vomit-inducing nausea of your fellow soldiers as you all spill onto the beach like overcooked spaghetti. The roar of the sea isn't quite romantic this morning. Instead, it's more like a chorus of volcanoes ready to undertake a serious mood, ushering you into an area where obstacles aren't simply obstacles. They're crafty barricades of doom. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, except the moles are more armed, and they definitely don't want to be whacked. And oh, what's that delightful aroma wafting about? Is it the smell of salty ocean air? Nope. It's the heady scent of desperation, determination, and a slick coating of fear. Imagine the waves carefully washing up on the shore, like they're unsure whether to embrace their new aquatic patrons or send them back with a firm, "Not today, soldier." As you wade deeper, the water embraces you like a frigid embrace from your wildly eccentric aunt, who insists you've lost weight since last Thanksgiving. While the sea attempts to tug you toward its depths, you drag your feet through mud and sand, stopping just long enough to wonder if your boots will ever truly dry out. Spoiler, they won't. In fact, you may just have started a new trend, sandy footwear becoming the latest fashion statement in military circles. Gunfire echoes overhead, a cacophony of noise and panic that sends your heart racing faster than a kid who's just spotted a cake at a birthday party. To your left, a soldier screams into the chaos, and then nothing more than a gust of wind. It's the kind of moment where you wonder if your life decisions have led you down this path of sandy injustice. I could have been at home binge-watching a historical drama instead. You think miserably, your mind racing between existential dread and the very real threat of being a war hero. As you glance around, there's a sense of absurdity. One soldier accidentally loses his helmet to a particularly enthusiastic wave, while another yells, "Not cool, Ocean! I wanted that!" You can't make this stuff up. If only someone on the battlefield had the forethought to set up a hot dog stand and sell snacks while the world crumbled around them. Talk about a missed opportunity. Imagine the headlines. Brave soldiers battling Nazis while enjoying gourmet fries. Now it's a party. Finally,
After what feels like an eternity, you reach the shore, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm akin to someone trying to dance to music that only they can hear. As you drop into a trench, you begin to catch your breath amidst the sounds of chaos, realizing that each soldier's journey onward isn't simply a tale of valor. It's a collection of absurd stories tangled together as a jigsaw puzzle, where the pieces are all the wrong shape. So, as you settle into the chaos of Omaha Beach, let the surreal atmosphere wash over you like that chilling ocean spray. In those moments of intensity, find humor, find comfort, and find the absurdity woven into the fabric of this chaotic tapestry. And let it guide you into a haze of dreams where that hot dog stand might just appear after all.
Chapter 21. The Warsaw Rewind, a Tango with Tragedy. Hey guys, ever find yourself holding a makeshift barricade against all odds, watching a troop of friendly neighbors completely forget your last birthday party? Well, tonight we're diving into a historical episode that has that same friendly vibe, except instead of cake, we've got tanks and triumphs of resistance, sprinkled over a backdrop of completely shattered dreams. Get ready for an absurdly engaging tale of the Warsaw Uprising. It's a story that's colder than your ex's leftovers and infinitely more complicated than assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. Before we dive headfirst into the ruins of hope and goodwill, don't worry, pillows will break your fall. Let's take a moment to encourage you to give that like button a gentle nudge. And if you're really enjoying this yarn, go ahead and subscribe. Imagine boasting to your friends, "Oh, you've been catching up on history. I'm feverishly following a channel that brings the past to life." Sort of. And if the mood strikes, drop a comment about your favorite historical oopsie. I'd love to hear about it. Okay, let's set the stage. Dim those lights, crank up the fan to create a breezy effect, unless you're feeling spontaneous and want to use an old toaster instead. Who doesn't love a retro vibe? Get cozy with your favorite blanket, throw on those ridiculous socks that haven't seen a washing machine since the invention of the wheel, and let's get philosophical. Ever wondered what it's like to set up makeshift barricades with whatever furniture you can scrounge? Most people might suggest a friendly game of Tetris. But picture this instead. When life hands you a decrepit library, do you A, use the books to build a cozy reading fort, or B, fortify your position like a medieval knight? Look at you. Give yourself a mental high five for wanting to defeat tyranny with a classic copy of War and Peace. Now, imagine you wake up in the heart of 1944 Warsaw, a city buzzing with determination and the smell of heroism, mingled with a hint of burnt cabbage from the last bistro hoping to stay afloat amidst the chaos. You stretch your arms, and thanks to the remnants of a clandestine bakery last night, there's hope. The sweet aroma of fresh bread lingers like a softly sung lullaby. But it's overshadowed by the impending clash of guns and disillusionment. So let's talk about barricades, so substantial yet so flimsy, like that hug you give when you're trying to impress your crush, but secretly wishing you'd eaten less for dinner. The Polish resistance fighters of the Warsaw Uprising had the brilliance of MacGyver mixed with the enthusiasm of a toddler with a crayon. In a city of rubble, they cobbled together barricades from anything they could find. It was less, "This is a well-thought-out defense strategy," and more, "Let's see how many phone books we can stack before someone notices." Amidst these makeshift fortresses, You find yourself standing shoulder to shoulder with brave souls, clutching weapons that look like they belong in a museum display or a prop shop. You scan the debris around you, a busted-up automobile, a couple of old garden gnomes that have seen better days, last seen outside a suburban home where the neighbor just wanted peace. But instead, here you are, channeling your inner action hero, ready to face whatever comes your way. And what was that distant rumble? A promising sound? Or maybe just the stomachs of your comrades growling after a breakfast of whatever we could find? If only the Soviets had decided that a peace treaty would be more cooperative than an awkward family dinner. The air between you thickens with dread, but attending this showdown is about courage, resistance, and outrunning the local bakery to grab the last pastry of life before it vanishes into history. Just as your heart races with the sweet thrill of anticipation, the Soviet army looms in the distance. Will they rush in to save the day? Long story short, they'd conveniently decided to take a coffee break right as you take to the streets, offering a beautiful example of the world's most egregious wrong place, wrong time scenario. You hold your breath, desperately hoping that the plan is to swoop in any second, like a knight in shining armor, or your pizza delivery guy when you've had a not-so-great day. But the Soviets, they hang back, like that one friend who never knows when to leave the party, effectively letting you bleed out in this absurd tug of war. It's a miscommunication massive enough to baffle the historians. One group claiming, "Can someone get me the latest email thread?" While you're just down here proving caffeine won't fix your performance anxiety, while gallantly charging toward the line drawn in the remnants of Warsaw. So here you stand in the rubble, feeling like a fanciful character from a storybook that's had a tragic twist, clutching your barely working weapon and a snack-sized portion of breadcrumbs that make for a terrible lunch. It's not just a struggle for life. It's a lady-sized shake of disbelief. Why couldn't the world get its act together? If the Soviets could just pop over and help, maybe, just maybe, all would be well. You might as well be in a bad sitcom where the punchline rests on a miscommunication and everyone's left waiting for the awkward laughter that never comes. As the conflict unfolds, amidst bursts of bullets, surreal moments arise, like the time someone accidentally drops a priceless statue while attempting to defend the neighborhood. It hits the ground with a thud, and you can practically hear echoes of confusion bouncing off the walls. Is that our prize for best barricade performance? With debris swirling around, the fight becomes a cacophony of chaos mixed with absurdity. So, breathe deep, my friend, and let the absurdity total a tad bit of grace in your chaos. Remember, history doesn't just happen. It dances, tumbles, and often falls flat on its face, with an audience left sitting in stunned silence. Therein lies the hope and bleak humor wrapped neatly into a historical tale that's far more intriguing and baffling than any "who wore it best" contest. So, next time you hear about a significant conflict, think of the ordinary lives entwined in its absurdity, of the brave souls who cobbled together ruins and dreams, standing against overwhelming odds, cup of cold coffee in hand, and a wry grin on their faces that says, "This may not end well, but at least my barricade is better than yours."
Chapter 22. The Bunker Blunder, a fiery finale. Hey guys, ever found yourself crammed into a tiny space with your closest friends, only to realize that one particular friend overate last night's pizza, and now everyone is trapped in a cloud of regret? Well, tonight we're descending into a tale that makes that awkward situation feel like a day at the beach, complete with sunscreen mishaps and sand getting everywhere. Strap in, because we're heading to the darkest depths of World War II, right into the chaotic belly of Hitler's bunker, where tension was as thick as the smoke from burnt toast. Buckle up as we navigate betrayal, disappointment, and perhaps just a seasoning of dark humor to sweeten the deal. Now don't forget to hit that like button for a little historical hilarity. And if you're enjoying this trip down the eerie lane of the past, go on and subscribe. You can be the envy of all your friends as you casually mention, "Oh, I'm feverishly following this YouTube channel about mildly interesting history." If the mood strikes, drop a comment about your own bunker moment, because who hasn't had days that could use a sprinkle of humor? So let's dim those lights. Turn on a fan, unless you fancy the zip of an old toaster for ambiance. Get cozy under your favorite blanket and prepare for a ride. Ever ponder what it would be like to have the fate of the world's most notorious dictator hanging in the balance, all while sitting on furniture that could probably use a more stylish neighborhood? You ever think, how many layers of reality does it take to sit in a bunker like a morally confused potato? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1945 Berlin. The air is thick and heavy, with a peculiar smell, part burnt paper, part bad decisions. You rub your eyes and glance around as your senses slowly awaken. Your surroundings could only be described as a delightful mix of slightly claustrophobic and "how did I end up here?" Welcome to Hitler's bunker, where the decor theme appears to be totally panic-stricken chic. The walls are ugly gray, peppered with the odd peeling poster of a much younger, more energetic Führer, who honestly has seen better days. It's dark, but not in that cozy, dim lights flickering kind of way. No, this is more akin to being stuffed into a closet with a bright idea that lost the battle to reason. A single bare bulb dangles precariously from the ceiling, its flickering light casting ominous shadows reminiscent of poor choices. You might hum the intro to a horror movie under your breath, all while squeezing your eyes shut and asking, how did I wander into a real-life episode of history gone wrong? You hear distant bomb sirens and frantic footsteps echoing like that one time you accidentally walked into the wrong flat during a party. You take a moment to consider your existence, stuck underground, surrounded by even more anxious souls, mulling over the colossal missteps of one man who apparently does not understand the beauty of a good escape plan. Seriously, how does someone orchestrate a world war without having a concrete backup plan? You wonder if he had ever considered just, I don't know, planting a tree instead of starting conflict. As you peer further into the cramped quarters, the reality sinks in. Around you are men dressed in a mismatched array of uniforms, some too tight, some sagging. The military fashion show you never asked for. There's a low murmur of conversations laced with despair and urgency, as well as the unmistakable odor of anxiety, mixed with something distinctly more pungent. Is that sauerkraut? Awkward. Clinking glasses reveal the figures participating in a farewell toast, looking for solace in fermented cabbage. And let's face it, no one's ever had a successful farewell while surrounded by sour foods and a ton of regret. You cringe, imagining the last moments of a man who reportedly refused to accept just how badly this whole affair was unraveling. And then, out of nowhere, there's a commotion. A scuffle breaks out over who gets the last crumb of a German chocolate cake, which, while historically inaccurate, sounds infinitely more appealing than your current reality. As Hitler and Eva Braun grapple for the ultimate prize of dessert and dignity, your mind drifts to the absurdity of it all. It's like watching a sitcom that's entirely too serious for its own good, where a couple of existential crises have crossed into slapstick territory. With a sigh, you contemplate the fate of the world leaders who couldn't lead, and it occurs to you that an exit strategy would have been a fantastic idea amid the chaos. But instead of a well-laid plan, you see a tragic culmination of poor choices brewing like an unwelcome storm as they prepare for the flaming finale. Somewhere in the depths of your mind, there's a part of you that hopes against all hope that they'll settle for curling up with a good book rather than a dramatic end. Alas, it's far too late for that. Time rolls on, and strangely enough, you realize that the atmosphere has changed from hostile to hilariously tragicomic. You could write a book about the idle banter you hear, tales of disastrous upper management with a backdrop of apocalyptic failure, if only you could remember them as effectively as they could rally a brigade. So, like a good second-rate film, tragedy unfolds amidst bad jokes shared over the shuddering threat of another Allied bomb. As the tension mounts and sparks fly, quite literally as the bunker ignites, you take solace in one fact, my friend. For all the dizzying confusion and shattered hopes surrounding you, at least you're not fighting over last remaining chocolates in the bunker of doom. And as they make that final toast, you can't help but feel a sense of ridiculous gratitude that such historical moments exist, reminding us all that behind every grand narrative, there's a cluster of mistakes worthy of laughter and perhaps a slight sigh of relief. And then, in an elaborate ignite of flames that you couldn't have choreographed better yourself, chaos reigns. One could only hope that people learned from their impressive ability to orchestrate their own demise with flair, leaving no stone unturned, or in this case, no dramatic flourish unlit. So there you have it, a bunker full of bad decisions, a final toast gone awry, and a reminder that sometimes even history needs a dash of humor to sweeten the pot of misery. Who could have thought that even in the darkest of moments, laughter can be found lurking just out of sight? If you manage to dodge the flames, that is. Chapter 23. The Liberating Lunacy. When allies made friends, and everyone else got left out. Hey guys! Have you ever tried to untangle yourself from a mess so absurd that it makes the time you accidentally walked into the wrong bathroom seem like a walk in the park? Well, tonight we're diving into an event that's darker and heavier than the regrets from that one trip to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Trust me, this will be a trip of epic proportions. Think liberating heroes and more bureaucratic hiccups than a clumsy ballet troupe. So hold on to your pillows, because we're stepping into the chaotic aftermath of World War II, where peace didn't just take its sweet time. It basically forgot to show up altogether. Now, feel free to give that like button a little tap. Only if you genuinely enjoy this, of course. Subscribe if you want to become the go-to history buff at your next awkward dinner party. And who knows, drop a comment sharing your own oops moments that make history seem slightly more relatable. All right, let's dim those lights. Crank that fan to a gentle breeze and snuggle under your favorite blanket. No judgment here. Imagine the life of a late-night bureaucrat in 1945. How many cups of coffee do you think it took to get through a day filled with painful, paperwork-laden meetings? Have you ever tried to orchestrate a group photo while everyone argues over who owed whom a sandwich from lunch? If we could put diplomatic treaties on social media, do you think the hashtags would trend faster than the tweets about cat videos? Congratulations, you've just woken up in a world trying to stitch itself back together after the grandest, most confounding conflict. It's 1945, and the air is electric, charged with the hopes and dreams of nations that need more therapy than friendship. You find yourself in a hall where decisions are made. Echoing rumors, fervent whispers, and an occasional cough that makes the whole room collectively hold its breath. The smell. Imagine musty paper mixed with the aroma of fatigue and despair. Not exactly an uplifting perfume choice. But here we are, as you blink in the dim light of this historic gathering. You notice representatives dressed in their finest suits. Who knew diplomacy looked like a poorly organized fashion show? They're arguing like a pack of over-caffeinated squirrels, debating the merits of fetching acorns compared to just hiding them. You must agree to these reparations, bellows one man, adjusting his bow tie, as if that could also adjust his stance on war debts. Or else you'll find yourselves circling back to the bad decisions we're all trying to avoid. Your head spins as you try to decipher the absurdity of negotiating peace treaties through a volley of awkward anecdotes about post-war sandwiches, swapping grim war stories as though they were embarrassing high school incidents. Ever notice that deciding on the fate of nations sometimes looks like you and your friends trying to pick a movie on Friday night? Wait, who wanted to watch the one where everyone dies? Yeah, good job, guys. But let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer chaos of it all, because frankly, the absurdity of post-war diplomacy could fill a series of sitcoms. One representative pulls out a map so old it makes you wonder if it belonged to Noah's Ark. Let's redraw the borders here, and we'll call this a victory, he gestures dramatically, only to have another delegate smirk, aghast at how geography has become an Olympic sport. It's a fascinating transformation from friendly neighbors to I'll take that piece of land, thank you very much, complete with imaginary scoreboards and a referee who was clearly napping. In the midst of all this negotiating nonsense, there are profound moments of realization. A sense of camaraderie grows in the oddest ways, like how every now and then someone breaks out into a rendition of a wartime ballad, and suddenly the mood shifts. It's like a karaoke night, but without the flashing lights or the promise of being seen on social media the next day. Surprisingly touching for a bunch of heads of state who didn't even bother to turn off their phones during the entire affair. One politician's ringtone rings out loud, pure comedy, as half the room turns to find out if they're conjuring political drama or just a little too enthusiastic about their afternoon espresso. Eventually, after what feels like a lifetime, they take a step back to catch their breath. It's time for images, pictures that will grace the history books, memorialized proof of peace in motion, or perhaps a comedic misadventure resembling a family reunion photo gone wrong. The irony doesn't stop there, as they raise glasses to toast, a selected drink no less potent than cold coffee and regrets, savoring this moment that feels more like a setup for disaster than a grand conclusion. As inspired rants dissolve into laughter, you can't help but chuckle at the sublime absurdity before you. A gathering where making peace looks like a mix of bad jokes, nostalgia, and the undeniable proximity of historical calamity. Because if there's one lesson to be carved into history, it's that behind the chaos, humans somehow find a way to connect, negotiate, and maybe even bumble along together, all while nudging the borders of sanity a little further. You find yourself marveling at this comic ballet of diplomacy that makes every little faux pas seem like a plot twist in a farce. And so, as nations reconstructed themselves and tried to weave together a world worth rebuilding, we learn a vital truth. Negotiation is less about hovering over maps and more about finding that shared laugh amid the absurdity, even if the punchline looks a lot like redrawn borders. And there you have it, a meeting of minds illuminating that even in the gravest of times, the laughter of humanity continues to echo, a nod toward the fact that peace might just be one great cosmic joke after all. Grab your cup of whatever you fancy, because this story isn't quite finished. Chapter 24. Hiroshima's unforgettable flash, when the world got hit by a really bad rave. Hey guys, have you ever had one of those moments when glowing LED lights seem to pulsate at alarming rates, and you wish you could just dial down the brightness of reality? Well, tonight, we're exploring an event that was literally brighter than your future. Hiroshima, 1945. Imagine a flash so bright it could make the sun wear sunglasses, but instead, it was a little more like watching your neighbor attempt to light their barbecue with only one match. Spoiler alert, things went sideways quickly. Now, if you find this story a tad heavy but equally fascinating, give that like button a gentle nudge, only if it tickles your fancy. Subscribe if you yearn to amuse your friends at the next awkward brunch by channeling your inner history buff. And hey, why not drop a comment sharing your best oops moments? You know, the ones where you realized you definitely didn't pack enough picnic snacks for the whole crew. So let's dim the lights, crank that fan to a cozy hum, and snuggle into your favorite blanket, wherever that may be. And as you settle in, ponder this. If you had to negotiate a peace treaty after a heavy night out, would you offer pizza to smooth things over? Or would you attempt to settle it with a celebrity chef's cooking show? And what's the most absurd thing you've accidentally done while trying to get your life together? Breadcrumbs of history await you. Congratulations! You've just woken up in Hiroshima, 1945, the morning after everything went remarkably wrong. The air crackles with an atmosphere that's less welcome to the party and more, oh no, we might need to call in the fire department. As you take a breath, the smell of burnt residue fills your nose. It's like if someone hosted a barbecue but forgot one crucial element: the meat. What's left is a mix of charred buildings and a few feebly flickering lights, remnants of a city trying to cling to what once was. The streets echo with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the faint sound of something like distant sobs. Well, that, and the occasional rustle of what you wish were leaves, but might be the city's broken dreams. Now you might be asking yourself, how could things possibly escalate to such a pyrotechnic disaster? Picture yourself as part of the crew aboard the B-29 bomber Enola Gay, gliding serenely above the clouds, feeling like the king of a beautiful militarized mountain. Sure, there's a little bit of tension, but who doesn't get a little nervous before committing to a massive act of destruction? It's like the plunge before you jump off the diving board, but instead of water, there's nothing but chaos awaiting you below. You look down at that tiny little town, with the brightness clouding your thoughts. It's peaceful down there, or at least it was until now. As you feel the weight of duty upon your shoulders, you can't help but wonder, do you think anyone ever gave the crew a "this is your life" speech before launching? Congratulations, you're about to make history. Just remember to keep that cringe-worthy teen diary of yours under control. As the ominous button gets pressed, there's a flash, a moment in time that, quite frankly, is more dazzling than anything LED lights could muster. It's blinding. And suddenly, you realize that you've turned the rager of the century into the night the world remembered with jaw-dropping horror. Not exactly the kind of whoops moment you want etched into the annals of history, right? But let's pause and take in the aftermath. As the mushroom cloud blooms into the backdrop of the sky, colorful like an over-enthusiastic art project gone wrong. It's as if the heavens themselves have decided to show off their fireworks. Except, if we're honest, these fireworks come with a side helping of doom. You can almost hear Earth whispering to itself, "Wasn't my living room already tidy enough?" Reflecting on this disaster, the world is suddenly plagued with a more profound burden than that of party favors gone awry. Diplomacy is put on shaky footing, like trying to balance a teetering stack of vintage cake plates during your grandma's birthday bash. As global leaders scramble to respond, it seems that the only thing more volatile than the situation is the way they debate fixing it. Now, I don't mean to poke fun at serious discussions, but can you picture those high-stakes meetings peppered with awkward small talk about what went wrong during the steak night the week before? What do we do about the tensions boiling over? One participant muses while simultaneously debating whether the last appetizer should have been grilled or baked. You can almost hear them mumble, "Well, I didn't take home any leftovers from last week." And so they stew in confusion, chuckling nervously at the absurdity of it all, struggling to find ways to make sense of the ill-fated choices that have turned the tide of history suddenly and frighteningly. Their challenges feel remarkably relatable, like when your group chat can't settle on a restaurant, only in this case, the consequences are a tad more substantial than an hour-long wait for tacos. Thus, as nations reel from that catastrophic flash, we find ourselves reminded that in moments of darkness, humanity must grapple with the most absurdly ironic idea, that light can be both hopeful and dangerous. And when dust settles, it's those shared moments of miscalculation that leave their mark, and history will always remember that dazzling day when humanity, and a whole lot of misplaced energy, hit the reset button in the most bizarre way possible. Wrap yourself in that thought, will you? Because amidst the chaos, there's a rhythm of responses, reflections, and realities that define us. And against all odds, we somehow find connection, even in the aftermath of a nuclear age. Who knows? You might just wake up to find yourself a little wiser and maybe a little more cautious about pressing buttons after hearing this tale. And that brings us to the close of this turbulent journey. Chapter 25. MacArthur's dramatic beach entrance, the return that wasn't just for show. Hey guys, have you ever experienced that moment when you're trying to make a grand entrance and trip over your own feet? Tonight, we're going to wade, quite literally, into one of the most dramatic beach landings in history. Picture it like watching your friend try to execute a cannonball, but instead creating a more dignified belly flop. This is the story of General Douglas MacArthur, a man who returned to the Philippines with all the fanfare of a rock star about to hit the stage, only to discover that the spotlight of history can be blinding. If you're feeling adventurous, give that like button a polite poke. No need to overwhelm it. Subscribe if you want a fun fact to drop at your next awkward gathering. And feel free to ring the comment bell with your most epic, I swear I can swim stories. You know, those times when you thought you were ready for the big stage, but ended up with your towel in one hand and a snack in the other. So, let's dim the lights, throw some pillows around, and get cozy while we weigh the risks of a dramatic entrance versus practical swimming skills. Now, imagine you had just parachuted onto a beach, but instead of surfing into a wave of cheers, you're greeted by sand that clings to your skin like an over-enthusiastic burrito. Does anyone really get how to look heroic while wrestling with grains of sand? And speaking of wrestling, what do you think was more awkward, MacArthur's entry, or when your high school friend tried to reenact The Notebook at prom? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1944, on the eve of a dramatic comeback so epic that even the tropical sun seems to adjust its rays for the occasion. You blink and realize you're on Leyte Island in the Philippines, the waves crashing like a rowdy crowd eager for a show. But let's not kid ourselves. The reality is a little grittier than the movies make it seem. It's early morning, and the air is thick with a mixture of salt, gunpowder, and hope. Mainly hope. Just beyond the crashing waves, you see silhouettes of soldiers, their faces a mix of determination and, did I remember to pack my toothbrush? As you walk along the beach, squishing the sand between your toes, you can't help but wonder, does it feel different staging a comeback when the whole world is watching? Or is it more like every time you log into social media, knowing that every misstep might become a meme before you can say, whoops? Back in the day, things were decidedly less digital and far more intense. Picture yourself dressed in a crisp military uniform, oozing charisma with a side order of dread. Yes, you know all about charisma, and yet you can just feel that sand in your boots irritating you like an uninvited guest crashing the party. Someone, in the back of your mind, is already screaming, "Be careful with that speech, MacArthur. It's more slippery than a banana peel." Let's rewind a bit and frame this dramatic scene. The U.S. had been fighting hard to reclaim the Philippines, a place MacArthur had been chased out of in 1942. After years of strategizing, deploying resources, and dodging more smoke than a magician at a poorly planned birthday party, he was finally standing on a beach, full of determination and more than a little drama. As you stand there, you might wonder if anyone handed him a how-to manual on coming back in glory while also elegantly dodging questions about his return. I mean, imagine him thinking, should I practice my dramatic pause now, or maybe just wing it? How hard could it be? Just a little wave to the crowd, smile gently, pretend I'm one with nature. And then the moment arrives. MacArthur strides ashore, his silhouette cutting an impressive figure against the rising sun, the wind blowing in a dramatic fashion that makes all hair stand on end. We're really hoping that's not a stray bee. It's almost enough to make you forget his earlier exodus, like how you forget your last gym session when you spot a delicious cake. But let's address the pink elephant, or maybe that's just a giant beach ball, in the room. As magnificent as this moment seems, it wasn't all cheers and applause. The Philippines were in disarray, and the air was thick, not just with nostalgia, but with tension thicker than the frosting on a birthday cake. MacArthur's presence was meant to signal hope, like using glitter to spruce up a charity bake sale. But sometimes hope comes with the side order of awkwardness. He takes to the makeshift podium eventually, a testament to durability, or perhaps just bad spatial awareness. As he delivers his iconic line, "I have returned," somewhere in the back of your mind, you can't help but wonder if that's how your cat feels every time you come home after a long day. Only, in this case, it's not just a few scratched furniture legs at stake. It's the morale of an entire nation. The cheers erupt, but all you hear are the muffled sounds of expectations settling in like scattered beach towels on a windy day. The realities of war loom just behind, like that one friend who refuses to let go of the past. And as the lights dim on this charming little piece of history, let's remember, there's something altogether human about those high-stakes moments, when the world watches, whether you trip on stage or nail the landing. You might just find that all anyone wants is to witness some real humanity mixed with a side of absurdity. So here you are, diving into a world fraught with both electric excitement and heavy anticipation. Who wouldn't love a grand entrance? Unless, of course, you've forgotten your lines or aren't ready for the spotlight. But let's leave the judgment aside and embrace the convoluted tapestry that is history, where the integrity of those grand proclamations sometimes takes a back seat to navigating sandy shores in oversized boots. Stay tuned as we continue to dive deeper into the humor and intricacies of a time that was anything but ordinary. And remember, awkward beach landings might just pack a punch they didn't sign up for. So the world survived the awkward, terrible 20s and the brutally fast, exhausting 40s. You've personally navigated the ridiculous burden of the Versailles Treaty, the Black Tuesday gut punch, the baffling politics of appeasement, and the sheer terror of living through a blitzkrieg. But listen closely to that silence now. As you settle down, remember the people of that time. They were just like you, except they were trying to buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow full of worthless money, then had to worry about whether a bomb would redecorate their kitchen. Tonight you're safe, warm, and hopefully very comfortable. You don't have to worry about a dictator carving up your country on a map. So tonight, as you tuck into your clean bed with hot water and indoor plumbing, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors, who survived the economic madness, the Molotov-Ribbentrop betrayal, and the terrifying, world-altering thunder of an atomic flash. Because history may be gross and terrifying, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and kind of ridiculous. Rest easy now. The world is quiet. Let all that historical tension just dissolve away. Sleep well.